Chapter 1272. The Six Paths of Reincarnation bracelet had basically completely replicated the abilities of the high-level demon ghost from the Samsara temple. The only difference was that the demon ghost could drag people into the Samsara temple without breaking the six paths of reincarnation. Even martial immortals couldn't get out. On the other hand, Chushio needed to first use the power of his own spirit to activate the six paths of reincarnation bracelet and pull the other party inside. Although this could be considered a flaw, there was an advantage to having a person wield the six paths of reincarnation bracelet. That was, Chushio knew which reincarnation state was the most lethal to a cultivator's Yuan Shen. Reincarnation after reincarnation seemed ordinary, but the humiliation and unwillingness was constantly imprinted in Xian Jialuo's memory. It constantly impacted his state of mind. At the same time, Chushio's spirit was constantly being consumed like water. This caused Chushio's expression to change slightly. Chushio hadn't tested the power of this thing before, but now it seemed that the six paths of reincarnation bracelet wasn't perfect. Chushio wasn't a demon ghost, so in order to activate it, he needed to use the power of his own spirit to support the lifelike illusion in the reincarnation cycle. Therefore, every time Xian Jialuo reincarnated in the six paths of reincarnation bracelet, Chushio had to consume a layer of the power of his spirit. With the power of Chushio's spirit, he could last about 50 reincarnations. Therefore, if Xian Jialuo could last 50 reincarnations, Chushio would have no choice but to stop. However, it was clear that Xian Jialuo's state of mind wasn't that strong. After experiencing about 10 reincarnations, Xian Jialuo's state of mind had completely fallen into a muddled state. He had forgotten who he was. Chushio had an epiphany in the six paths of reincarnation and realized that, I am who I am. No matter how many reincarnations he went through, no matter what his identity was, he was Chushio, and he could only be Chushio. However, Xian Jialuo clearly didn't have this kind of awareness. He was completely lost in it. A dozen or so reincarnations seemed very long, but to the outside world, it was only an instant. When the six paths of reincarnation bracelet lit up again, Xian Jialuo's Yuan spirit was thrown out of the six paths of reincarnation. The Yuan spirit's light was extremely dim, as if it would be extinguished in the next second. Chushio directly grabbed Xian Jialuo's soul, while the other Sanskrit warriors roared, "Chushio! How dare you!" Smiling coldly at them, Chushio's primordial spirit glowed in his hand and crushed Xian Jialuo's primordial spirit to pieces. His primordial spirit dissipated and his true spirit exploded. Just like that, a martial immortal level expert died before the crowd. In fact, most people thought that Xian Jialuo's death was inexplicable and very sullen. In fact, that was indeed the case. Ever since Xian Jialuo had stepped into the martial immortal realm, he had not fought against anyone. This was his first battle. Yet, the result was that he was killed by Chushio in 2 attacks. The clear sky illuminating shadow slashed at the physical body. It was impossible to defend against. The six paths of reincarnation injured the Yuan spirit. It was unavoidable. After 2 attacks, a martial immortal from the Sanskrit sect didn't even have a chance to fight back. It sent chills down everyone's spine. Even their ally, the Sky Luo Temple, couldn't react in time. Fa Jing let out a long sigh and said to Iguatia and the others, "Everyone, do you still want to fight? Since Benefactor Chu has joined forces with the Sky Luo Temple and helped us kill Xian Jialuo, we can't just sit back and watch you hit him when he's down. If you want to settle your grudges, wait until we leave the Central Plains. The Sky Luo Temple will not interfere." Iguatia and the others looked at each other and retreated almost at the same time. Chushio's strength had somewhat exceeded their expectations. Now that Xian Jialuo was dead and the Sky Luo Temple was wholeheartedly protecting Chushio, it was meaningless for them to persist. Of course, most importantly, they were somewhat frightened by Chushio. That was a martial immortal. A martial immortal who stood at the peak of the Daluotian continent, had been killed by Chushio in 2 moves. They couldn't accept it no matter what. "Grandmaster Fa Jing, the rest is up to you." Chushio's face was pale as he sat cross-legged on the ground and began to recover his aura. His strength and Yuan spirit were basically all depleted. Even Lu Jianghe and the others were in the same state, and had no more strength to fight. Of course, the Sky Luo Temple didn't need them anymore. With Xian Jialuo's death, the entire Sanskrit sect was without a leader, and was already starting to panic. As Yi Guixia and the others left the battlefield, Fa Jing, the martial immortal, had time. His pure lotus Buddha light shone and was almost unstoppable. The Sanskrit sect's side was completely routed. The fierce battle lasted for a long time before it ended. Nearly half of the Sanskrit sect's side was killed, and the rest fled in panic. Although they didn't completely wipe out the Sanskrit sect's warriors, they had killed enough people this time. The Sanskrit sect's foundation was there for all to see. Regardless of whether the warriors who came in were palace masters or not, they all had some skills. After all, Fa Jing was just one person. Apart from those who were targeted by Fa Jing, who would definitely die, the others also used secret techniques to escape. Fa Jing walked in front of Chu Xiu and closed his eyes again. He bowed to Chu Xiu and said, "This time, it was thanks to almsgiver Chu that the Sky Luo Temple was able to deal a heavy blow to the Sanskrit sect. Almsgiver Chu killed Xian Jialuo, so you have the greatest merit. The token and soul crystals we obtain this time will be equally divided with almsgiver Chu. I wonder if almsgiver Chu has any objections?" Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "Let's do as Great Master Fa Jing says. I said before that anyone who cooperates with me, Chu Xiu, will not be disappointed. I hope that in the future, I will have the opportunity to join forces with the Sky Luo Temple." This time, Chu Xiu had helped the Sky Luo Temple kill Xian Jialuo. This could be said to be something that no one in the Sky Luo Temple had been able to do in the past 100 years. After all, Xian Jialuo was now a palace master. If he had been in the western region, when it was his turn to fight, the Sanskrit sect and the Sky Luo Temple would have been at the peak of their battle. The entire Sanskrit sect would have mobilized countless experts, so it would not have been easy to kill Xian Jialuo. Only in a place like the Central Plains, where everyone's strength was similar and there was no outside help, could Xian Jialuo be killed. Therefore, at this time, the warriors of the Sky Luo Temple had a good impression of Chu Xiu and did not feel repulsed by him like before. After all, strength was the best way to talk. However, Fa Jing looked at Chu Xiu with a profound look in his eyes. He chuckled and said, "If there is a chance, that would be for the best. I only hope that benefactor Chu can be sincere when the time comes." Others might not have noticed, but Fa Jing felt that Chu Xiu had other plans when he decided to join forces with the Sky Luo Temple. After Yi Guixia and the others made their move, Chu Xiu had been too calm. Although the two sides had only been in contact for a few days, Fa Jing could feel that Chu Xiu's intentions were not shallow. Could it be that he had not noticed that he had offended so many forces? Therefore, when Yi Guixia and the others appeared, he did not panic. After all, he had most likely expected such a situation. Joining forces with the Sky Luo Temple to attack the Brahmin sect was one step, but at the same time, he wanted to lure Yi Guixia and the others out and use the power of the Sky Luo Temple to attack. This was probably another step. However, this was only Fa Jing's guess. He did not have any proof. Furthermore, Chu Xiu had killed Xian Jialuo, so he naturally could not say anything bad about him. However, in his heart he had already raised a trace of vigilance against Chu Xiu. However, Chu Xiu did not care. It was enough to join forces with this group of monks this time. He did not know what would happen the next time they met. After recovering his strength and obtaining the token and soul crystals, Chu Xiu prepared to bid farewell to the people of the Sky Luo Temple. The crisis of the Brahmin sect had been resolved, so there was no need for the two sides to join forces. Although the two sides would not be considered enemies for the rest of the journey, it was still a little inappropriate to travel together at this time. However, before leaving, Fa Jing suddenly said, "Almsgiver Chu, that bracelet of yours that can pull the other party's spirit into it, why does it look like an item of the Sky Luo Temple?" Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Great Master Fa Jing has a good eye. This thing is the secret treasure of the Sky Luo Temple in the past. 10,000 years ago, the ancestor of my lineage exchanged martial arts with the seniors of the Sky Luo Temple. Although the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet, used to belong to the Sky Luo Temple, This was not its original function. It only gained this special ability after transforming into a demonic ghost, so Chu Xiu was not afraid that Fa Jing would recognize it. Hearing Chu Xiu say this, Fa Jing just nodded slightly and did not ask much. Although there were many secret treasures of the Sky Luo Temple, none of them had been lost in the past few hundred years, and none of them were similar to Chu Xiu's 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet. Looking at the backs of Chu Xiu and the others as they left, Fa Ming could not help but say, "In this trip to the Central Plains, we were lucky to meet almsgiver Chu. Otherwise, it would have been terrible. This is really a matter of luck." Fa Jing's face showed a trace of an unfathomable smile. "Luck? Junior brother, don't believe in things like luck. Luck will not come to you by itself. Chu Xiu is also not an easy person to deal with. Except for the brothers of the Sky Luo Temple, it is best to leave some leeway for outsiders in the future." Fa Ming touched his bald head, feeling a little puzzled. What does senior brother mean? This time, they clearly cooperated very well with almsgiver Chu and the others. At this time on Chu Xiu's side, Shang Tianliang looked back and said, "Monk Fa Jing is a little suspicious of you." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "So what? I wasn't the one who suggested joining hands, they were the ones who suggested it. Besides, they didn't lose anything by dealing with the Sanskrit sect, did they? Without me, the Sky Luo Temple would have been eliminated by the Sanskrit sect. Although they wouldn't have lost too many people, they would have lost the qualification to compete for the Exalted Divine Palace. Now that we have collected enough tokens and soul crystals, we can directly enter the Central Plains and wait for the time to come at the Exalted Divine Palace." With the tokens and soul crystals of the Sanskrit sect, as well as those collected by Lu Fengxian and the others, Chu Xiu now had more than 500 tokens and more than 400 kilograms of soul crystals. With this amount, not to mention the top 6, he could even secure a spot in the top 3. Therefore, Chu Xiu could just sit back and watch the final competition in front of the Exalted Divine Palace, provided that no one provoked him. Chapter 1273. Outside the central region of the Exalted Divine Palace, Chu Xiu, Lu Fengxian, and the others showed a hint of doubt in their eyes. This was different from what Zhong Qiushui had described. According to Zhong Qiushui, everyone would gather in front of the Exalted Divine Palace in the last 10 days. After a series of battles, they would wait for the palace to open. But what about the Exalted Divine Palace now? What appeared in front of Chu Xiu and the others was actually a stretch of fog, a deep and serene fog that devoured their senses. They could not see what was inside at all. This was a scene that Zhong Qiushui had not mentioned to them before. Moreover, because the distance between them had shrunk, there were other cultivators not far away from Chu Xiu and the others. They were also hesitating in front of the fog, not knowing what was going on. Clearly, this was the first time they had encountered such a scene. Is this a demonic ghost? Chu Xiu tried to release a strand of astral energy, but it immediately disappeared as soon as it entered the fog, cutting off their connection. Shang Tianliang frowned. If this thing is a demonic ghost, how large is the area it covers? It has directly enveloped the entire Exalted Divine Palace. A demonic ghost of this level is probably something only a peak 9th heaven's martial immortal could handle, right? They had all encountered high-level demonic ghosts before. Apart from the ghost general that could move freely, the other 2 demonic ghosts didn't cover too large an area, only the size of a village and a temple. If a demonic ghost could cover the entire Exalted Divine Palace, how terrifying would it be? Don't go in yet. Let's circle around the Exalted Divine Palace and see if Elder Wei is here. It was already the final moments of the Central Plains contest, so everyone should have gathered here. However, Chu Xiu and the others circled around the Exalted Divine Palace and saw many cultivators, but they still didn't see Wei Shuya. This made Chu Xiu's heart skip a beat as he had a bad feeling. At the side, Mei Qinglian said, "Don't worry. When Old Wei was young, he had survived even more dangerous situations. In the Battle of the 9 Heavens Mountain, there was no chance of survival, but Old Wei still survived. It will be the same this time." Lu Fengxian also said, "I also believe that Elder Wei will be fine. My intuition is quite accurate." Lu Fengxian's words were somewhat comforting to Chu Xiu. His intuition was really accurate. However, if he had known that this would happen, he would have asked Master Yuanji to perform a divination before he came here. At this time, a voice suddenly came from behind Chu Xiu. "Brother Chu, you're all here. Why don't I see Brother Lu?" Chu Xiu turned around and saw Yinlingzi. He had come with Fang Yizhen and Su Guishan of the Three Pure Palace. Brother Lu has no intention of participating in the final battle for the exalted divine palace, so he should be cultivating in a safe place. Chu Xiu cupped his hands in greeting to Fang Yizhen. "Brother Fang, we meet again." Yinlingzi was surprised. "Senior Brother Fang, you two know each other?" Fang Yizhen chuckled. "No discord, no concord. I still have to thank Brother Chu for not killing me." Fang Yizhen pointed to Su Guishan. "This is Senior Brother Su Guishan, the direct disciple of our Three Pristine Temples Tao Master." Chu Xiu and the others subconsciously raised their eyebrows when they heard this word. The title of the Tao Master's personal disciple, no matter where it was exceptionally dazzling. To put it bluntly, even if you brought a dog over and said that it was the Tao Master's personal disciple, people would still think that it was the Howling Sky Divine Hound. The Daoyu Ocean didn't have the Dragon and Tiger Storm Sovereign list like the lower realms, so no one could say for sure who the strongest Daoyu Ocean expert was. But the publicly acknowledged strongest experts were only a few, such as the Heavenly Treasure Temple's World Sovereign, the Three Pristine Temple's Tao Master, and the Sanskrit Sect's Sect Master. Among these people, the one most likely to be the strongest Daoyu Ocean expert was the Tao Master. Su Guishan nodded at Chu Xiu and the others, but didn't say anything else. Fang Yizhen said apologetically, "Please don't take it to heart, my senior brother has always been like this." Su Guishan wasn't arrogant. Rather, he was indifferent. He was extremely indifferent towards most things. Chu Xiu had only surprised him slightly when he had attacked Exine Jialua. "That's right, Brother Fang, do you know what's going on with this fog?" Fang Yizhen scratched his head. "Before we came, the ancestral master said that there would be some changes in the struggle for the exalted divine palace. You can say it's good or bad, but it's different from usual. How you choose and how you deal with it will be up to you." Su Guishan said indifferently, "The exalted divine palace is opening about 20 to 30 years ahead of schedule. That already explains a lot. It's just that those monster ghosts have stirred up some trouble again. The exalted divine palace is right at the center. If they can't even pass through this fog, they naturally don't have the qualifications to enter. That's good too. With this layer of fog, we can filter out quite a few people trying to pass through." After saying this, Su Guishan stepped into the fog without the slightest hesitation. Fang Yizhen shrugged, seemingly helpless about Su Guishan's personality, but he still stepped into the fog. Lu Jiang, he rubbed his chin. Who is this guy trying to pass off as? This bunch of cow noses speak so strangely. It's like their eyes are growing on top of their heads. Only after saying this did Lu Jiang he realize that Yinlingzi was also present. He hurriedly said, "Little Taoist Yinlingzi, please don't take offense. I wasn't talking about you." Yinlingzi smiled. "It's fine. This little Taoist's nose isn't that big, so of course I won't take it personally." "Taoist Yinlingzi, are you not going to enter?" Chu Xiu asked. Yinlingzi shook his head. "The final struggle for the exalted divine palace has no place for this little Taoist. There's no point in forcing my way in. I've already seen the central plains and can't enter the exalted divine palace, so why take the risk? There's no point in forcing things that you can't get." Yinlingzi's personality was in line with the Taoist doctrine of peace and inaction. He didn't fight for things and he didn't force things. Perhaps in the eyes of others, if you don't fight for something in the Jianghu, you will definitely be at a disadvantage. But for Yinlingzi, even if he didn't fight for something, no one would be able to take it away from him. Chu Xiu looked at Lu Fengxian and the others. "What about you? Are you going to enter?" Mei Qinglian shook her head. "I've already stepped into the profound understanding realm. There's no point in entering. I can't possibly become a martial immortal in one go, right?" LV Fengxian also said, "I'll also wait here. If Old Wei doesn't come over from behind, we can also provide support here." Shang Tianliang nodded. "I'll guard here with these two kids." Experts with the strength of half-step martial immortals and martial immortals will definitely choose to enter the mist. I will guard here. If anyone dares to cause trouble, I will be able to deal with them. After everyone entered the fog, Shang Tianliang, a half-step martial immortal level existence, was practically undefeatable. With Shang Tianliang there to protect Chu Xiu, no matter how many people Chu Xiu had offended, he would not have to worry about anyone coming to cause trouble for him. Lu Jiang, he thought for a moment. Then he said, "If you all guard here, I'll go with Chu Xiu. That way, we can look after each other." He didn't have any thoughts about the exalted divine palace. Furthermore, with his strength, although he wouldn't die easily, it was unknown whether Chu Xiu would look after him, or he would look after Chu Xiu after entering the mist. That said, he was still brooding over what Su Guishan had said about people passing off fish eyes as pearls. He was the grand demon exalted blood sea. Why would he need to pass off fish eyes as pearls? While they were chatting, many cultivators had already entered the mist. For example, the two half-step martial immortals from the sword sect, Yin Jifei and Yi Guixia, as well as exalted primal Yang's faction, Ouyang Sheng and the others, all entered without hesitation. The exalted divine palace only opened once every several decades. They had already come this far. If they still chose to shrink back, it would be a joke. Chu Xiu and Lu Jiang, he didn't waste any time either. They directly stepped into the mist. However, when they stepped into the mist, the scene that appeared before them astonished them. It surpassed their imaginations. What appeared before Chu Xiu and Lu Jiang, he was a towering city. The city walls were several hundred meters tall, and they were all built with black stones. Moreover, the sky and earth here were extremely dark. It was completely different from the misty feeling of the outside world. There was an oppressive feeling, as if black clouds were pressing down on the city. Chu Xiu looked behind him. There was no mist behind them. Instead, there was only endless darkness. He could sense it with his perception, but he couldn't find the end. It seems that Su Guishan was right. This place was probably created by a demonic ghost. Lu Jiang, he couldn't help but exclaim in shock. A demonic ghost can create such a large domain? What level is this demonic ghost at? Although Lu Jianghe had killed quite a number of demonic ghosts, the area covered by those demonic ghosts was extremely small. Even the illusions of some low-level demonic ghosts were very crude, and he could easily see through them. However, he couldn't see the end of the city. Just how powerful were these demonic ghosts? When Chu Xiu and Lu Jiang arrived at the city gates, they discovered that there were actually people guarding the city gates. Moreover, there were two malicious ghosts guarding the city gates. They had green faces and sharp fangs. They had 2 horns on their heads, and their lower bodies were like those of a spider with 8 legs. They looked extremely evil. Seeing Chu Xiu and Lu Jiang walk over, the 2 malicious ghosts guarding the gate said, "If you want to enter the city of the wronged, you'll have to pay for your life first." Seeing these 2 things, Lu Jiang subconsciously wanted to attack, but he was stopped by Chu Xiu. "Look at what's hanging on the city walls." Lu Jiang looked up and saw a head hanging on the city walls. Moreover, this head was somewhat familiar. It was one of the 2 rogue cultivators who had besieged them with Su Jiang. Although the other side wasn't too strong, he was still a peak heaven and earth profound opening realm existence. Chapter 1274. Although high-level demonic ghosts are terrifying, they are not invincible. At the peak of heaven and earth profound understanding, even if they cannot win, they can still escape. Just like Gui Jiang from before, although he can fight against a martial immortal, Su Jiang and Chen Jiulong can still escape using a secret technique. Before Lu Jiang did not put the evil ghosts guarding the city in his eyes. How strong can 2 little demonic ghosts guarding the city be? But after seeing the human head, he did not say anything. This human head, is it real? Lu Jiang asked cautiously. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "What do you think? Don't say that you can't sense the blood and qi fluctuations in the human head. Even if it is fake, to be able to hide from your eyes and even your natural sense of blood and qi. How can a demonic ghost of this level be weak?" Chu Xiu walked over and asked, "How much does it cost to buy the passage?" One of the evil spirits took out a dirty small basin and said fiercely, 2 people need 4 caddies and 4 tails of blood. Chu Xiu said to Lu Jianghe. Let them bleed. Lu Jianghe said with dissatisfaction. Why should I bleed? You cultivate the blood demon divine art. Do you still lack this bit of blood? You also know the blood demon divine art. When we enter this city of wrongful death later, if we encounter any danger, will we rely on you or me? Of course, I have to maintain my peak state. Not a single drop of blood can be shed in vain. Lu Jianghe. Now he suddenly regretted following Chu Xiu into this city. Although it is true that he cultivates the blood demon divine art, he did not bleed in vain. However, although Lu Jianghe is a bit unwilling, he still obediently ran to bleed. After all, what Chu Xiu said is very reasonable, he is unable to refute. After letting out the blood, the 2 evil ghosts opened the city gate and let Chu Xiu and the others in. Inside the ghost town, not a sound could be heard. All the streets were neat and tidy, and so were the houses. It was so neat that it made people feel strange, because every house was exactly the same. Even the decorations at the entrance were the same, as if they had been copied. At this moment, a strange sound suddenly came from the street. Someone was playing a flute, but the sound was extremely strange. It was like the howling of ghosts from the 9 serenities of hell. Chu Xiu pulled Lu Jianghe along, pushed open a door, and entered a room to hide. Apart from a few tables and chairs, the room was completely empty. The only thing that caught everyone's attention was a shrine in the center of the room. However, the shrine didn't contain a statue of a god. Instead, it contained a soul crystal. A soul crystal the size of a fist. Lu Jianghe raised his eyebrows and said, Could it be that in this city of tragic deaths, every house has a soul crystal? This city is so big. If we search every house, we can find a lot of soul crystals. It's a big profit. Chu Xiu stared at the soul crystal for a long time, and suddenly said, This soul crystal is alive. Lu Jianghe trembled fiercely. Alive? What do you mean? Chu Xiu squinted his eyes and said, It's literally what it means. Focus your mind and carefully sense the soul crystal. Do you see anything? Lu Jianghe did as Chu Xiu said. Sure enough, in the deepest part of the soul crystal, there was a figure, but from the clothes, it didn't look like a modern martial artist. What is this thing? A demonic ghost? Chu Xiu said in a deep voice. Actually, I've always had a question, and that is whether or not demonic ghosts will die. Previously, Zhong Qiushui said that because of the distortion of the rules of power in the central province, demonic ghosts were formed. Martial artists' primordial spirits won't dissipate here. But what about demonic ghosts? We killed demonic ghosts, and demonic ghosts turned into soul crystals. But are they really dead? Is it the primordial spirit that perished, or the soul that dissipated? But one of the rules of this place is that the primordial spirit is immortal, so how can the soul dissipate? Lu Jianghe suddenly thought of something, and his body shook violently. You mean the demonic ghosts in the central province can't die at all? Chu Xiu said in a deep voice. At least according to my guess, demonic ghosts can't die. Even if we kill them, they will continue to gather power and be reborn. The soul crystal is only the source of their power, their outer shell. If we take their outer shell, will they gather power again? Just like the soul crystals worshipped in the shrines. The power in the city of tragic deaths is even stronger than in the central province, and it slowly seeps into the soul crystals. Who knows when they will once again become demonic ghosts? Lu Jianghe couldn't help but ask, just what are those Daluotian fellows up to? The exalted divine palace has existed for 10,000 years, and I don't believe they don't know this. Demonic ghosts can't die, and if we kill one batch, there will be another batch, and in the end, more and more will appear. Are they trying to turn the entire Daluotian population into a ghost horde? Chu Xiu said indifferently. Even if the top Daluotian experts don't get along with each other, they shouldn't act recklessly in this sort of matter. Are they just going to watch as something happens to the Daluotian people? They clearly have their reasons for not doing so. It's not that they don't want to, but that they can't. As the two of them spoke, the strange sounds outside grew louder and louder. The city of tragic deaths shielded their senses, so Chu Xiu and Lu Jianghe could only look out through the crack in the door. On the long street, a group of people was slowly making their way over. There were no people in the group, only demonic ghosts. However, these ghosts looked a little strange, very much like the ghost generals Chu Xiu had encountered before. They all wore the same armor, and their bodies were hidden from view. Only a layer of black mist could be seen coiling around the armor. There were also several strange existences around these ghost soldiers. They looked like humans, but they were tall and thin, almost abnormally tall. They were at least 10 meters tall, and they wore mourning clothes and bamboo hats. In their hands, they held bone flutes and played the sinister tune from before. The leader of this group, the demonic ghost, was even stranger. It wore golden armor that was engraved with strange Sanskrit characters, and it even emitted a faint Buddhist light. This made Chu Xiu wonder if these demonic ghosts were from the Empyrean Temple, or the Sanskrit sect when they were alive. Speaking of which, for some reason, it seemed that the demonic ghosts they turned into after their deaths were extremely powerful. Was it because the Buddhist martial artists were originally strong in tempering their minds, so after they turned into demonic ghosts, their strength also increased? While Chu Xiu was still wondering, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. He turned his head abruptly and saw that Lu Jianghe's eyes were blurred, and his body was constantly trembling as if he was immersed in some kind of illusion. Chu Xiu frowned, and the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet in his hand shone with a golden yuan shen light. Like a great bell, it resounded in Lu Jianghe's mind, shaking him awake. Lu Jianghe suddenly coughed out blood, and his eyes regained clarity. What's going on? Did you fall into the demonic ghost's illusion? Lu Jianghe's eyes were still filled with horror, and he said, "Didn't you feel it? The sound in the bone flute directly brought me into the memories of these demonic ghosts. I was muddle-headed, and I was transformed into a demonic ghost by the distorted rules." Chu Xiu shook his head. He really didn't feel these things. Although the sound of the flute was evil, it was only evil, and it didn't affect Chu Xiu at all. Was it because his yuan shen was stronger than Lu Jianghe's? Or because he had refined the demonic ghost soul crystal before, so he didn't feel the influence? Thinking of the matter of him refining the demonic ghost soul crystal, Chu Xiu's face suddenly changed. It seemed that refining the soul crystal of a high-level demonic ghost would also attract the attention of a high-level demonic ghost. He subconsciously turned his head and looked at the crack of the door. At this moment, a scarlet eye suddenly appeared from the crack of the door, full of twisted malice. "Found you!" Chu Xiu directly slashed out with the broken formation in his hand, and the powerful saber light instantly shattered the house. He and Lu Jianghe also jumped out of the house as fast as they could. However, the next moment, the house that was destroyed by him began to strangely restore itself. It was not an illusion, but as if time was flowing backward, returning to its original appearance. The demonic ghost in golden Buddhist armor pointed at Chu Xiu and shouted in a low voice, "You killed my compatriots and broke into the city of the wronged. You deserve to die." As his voice fell, the golden-armored demonic ghost held a long staff carved with a ferocious ghost, and directly smashed it towards Chu Xiu's head. The other ghost soldiers also roared and rushed over, and the incomparably tall ghosts in shrouds played the bone flute in their hands. The sound was countless times louder than before. At this moment, Chu Xiu finally felt the influence. It was like a demonic sound piercing his ears, constantly attacking his mind, as if it wanted to pull his yuan shen out. The divine domain bloomed, and yin and yang and the 5 elements reversed, constantly strangling the power of the golden-armored demonic ghost and the other ghost soldiers. However, as soon as he attacked, Chu Xiu found that the power of these demonic ghosts was actually real. Simply put, their current state was actually the same as the ghost general, not between real and fake, but with real physical power. Lu Jianghe had never encountered a ghost general, and he was surrounded by a group of ghost soldiers. He shouted, "What is this thing? Its power is real, and it has no flesh and blood. Is it a demonic ghost or not?" Originally, when facing the demonic ghosts that only had the power to invade one's mind, his blood devil power was still somewhat useful. At least he could distinguish between real and fake. However, facing this kind of demonic ghost without flesh and blood, but with real power, the effect of the blood devil power was instantly reduced to the minimum. Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "Fake and real, of course it is also a demonic ghost. The special high-level demonic ghost I encountered before looked like this. However, that demonic ghost became like that because of an accident, and the demonic ghosts here are definitely not normal. Then what should we do? The formation-breaking sword in Chuxio's hand slashed out a biting cold light, ethereal and formless, directly shredding all the ghost soldiers in front of Lu Jianghe. What should we do? Of course, kill our way out. Chapter 1275. After going through the tempering in the 6 paths of reincarnation, the high-level demonic ghosts that did not have a physical body and focused on attacking the state of mind could do nothing to Chuxio. Of course, those things were more troublesome. These demonic ghosts that had a physical body and could be killed were easier to deal with. He opened his god domain and reversed the yin and yang in the domain, killing everything in its path. The ghost soldiers were all slowed down so that Lu Jianghe could kill them. At the same time, Chuxio slashed down with the breaking formation in his hand. The powerful saber radiance sent the golden ghost general flying with a momentum that could tear the world apart. However, the golden armor on the golden ghost general was made of an unknown material. It was extremely tough and could repair itself automatically. With Chuxio's current strength, although the golden armor with Sanskrit characters on it had been shattered, the next moment, the golden armor began to absorb the surrounding power and began to repair itself. This is somewhat similar to the ghost general from before. Chuxio raised his eyebrows. He formed a seal and performed the Great Compassion mantra. A huge demon god shadow tore through the sky and pressed the golden armor ghost general to the ground. The breaking formation in his hand slashed out continuously. Wherever the saber radiance passed, the surrounding houses were directly torn apart. However, in the next moment, they were immediately repaired. However, the golden armor on the golden armor ghost general had been completely torn apart. Although it wanted to repair itself, it could only struggle under Chuxio's powerful strength, leaving behind a cloud of black fog. The 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet in Chuxio's hand emitted a golden Buddha light, directly sucking the black fog into the bracelet and madly killing it. After a while, the black fog completely disappeared, leaving only a golden soul crystal with strange Sanskrit characters on it. Chuxio looked back and saw that Lu Jianghe was not done yet. He shook his head and said, "So slow." As soon as he finished speaking, the power of the god domain around Chuxio instantly increased by 10 times. The violent chi of heaven and earth suddenly erupted, killing the rest of the ghosts. After they died, they also left behind some soul crystals. However, those soul crystals were very small. They were only equivalent to the soul crystals of ordinary mid-tier demonic ghosts, weighing no more than half a kilogram. Lu Jianghe said angrily, "It would be strange if we could be fast enough to deal with these things that don't even have vitality." Right at this moment, a series of shrill ghostly howls rang out. It sounded like they were being played by various musical instruments, and they were all coming from the direction of Chuxio and the others. Chuxio's expression changed slightly. "Retreat first." If another golden-armored ghost general like that were to appear, Chuxio would not fear it. That golden-armored ghost general had yet to reach the level of a martial immortal. Thus, it would be easy to deal with. However, the city of wrongful deaths was filled with a strange feeling. Who knew if there would be even stronger ghost generals appearing? When Chuxio and Lu Jianghe escaped to a place that seemed safer and could no longer hear those strange sounds, Chuxio said, "Old Lu, do you feel something wrong?" Lu Jianghe snorted lightly. "Of course I feel it. Everything in this damned place feels wrong. If I had known this, I wouldn't have come with you." Chuxio shook his head. He took out the soul crystal of the golden-armored ghost general and said, "I'm not talking about that. I'm saying that there's something wrong with this demonic ghost. I've killed 3 high-level demonic ghosts, and you've also encountered quite a few. However, the demonic ghosts that we've encountered, whether they're evil or abnormal, are all monsters that have been twisted by the rules of the central planes. To put it simply, they only have instincts but no thoughts. But the golden-armored ghost general we encountered before was different. It could speak, communicate with us, and had emotions. Most importantly, he said that I had killed his compatriots. A demonic ghost that can think that it has compatriots, a demonic ghost that recognizes its own identity, Can such a demonic ghost still be considered a monster? Lu Jiang he let out a soft cry of surprise. You mean the demonic ghosts here have already evolved to have their own consciousness? Chu Xiu shook his head. I don't know, but these things are definitely not simple. As he said this, Chu Xiu looked at the golden soul crystal in his hand and suddenly said, Old Lu, help me protect me. I want to refine this thing and see. Lu Jiang he was shocked when he heard this. I say, great cult master Chu, you're not a 3-year-old child. Why do you want to try everything you see? You said it yourself that this thing is very evil, and you still want to refine it? If you don't try it, how will you know if it's good or bad? On the path of martial arts, one must be brave enough to try and not be complacent. Just as Lu Jiang he wanted to say that being complacent didn't mean that one should be courting death, Chu Xiu had already started refining it. He could only help protect Chu Xiu. The power in this golden soul crystal was slightly weaker than the soul crystal of a normal high-level demonic ghost. However, what it contained was not just the power of a normal primordial spirit. It actually contained an extremely pure Buddhist power, which merged into Chu Xiu's body. This suddenly made Chu Xiu understand something. In the central planes, the power of demonic ghosts was intangible. Even though they could transform into a myriad of forms, it was only within the central planes. However, this city of tragic deaths was real. The power of nothingness could actually take on a physical form, which created this kind of demonic ghost that had taken on a physical form. The other party should have been a Buddhist warrior when he was alive. Therefore, the power he condensed also contained a trace of Buddhist power. Lu Jiang he guarded Chu Xiu for a few hours. After he finished refining it, he asked, How is it? How does it feel? Chu Xiu rubbed his chin and said, This thing can be considered a treasure. The various kinds of power contained in it are all purified and pure power. When I refine this soul crystal, it is equivalent to a heaven and earth mystic enlightenment realm warrior sacrificing himself to pass on his power to me. If there is a chance, I can kill a few more. This kind of soul crystal is far more useful for accumulating power than normal soul crystals. Lu Jiang he pointed in a direction and said, If you want to kill a few more, you can go over there and have a look. It's almost a night parade of 100 ghosts over there. Even without Lu Jiang he pointing, Chu Xiu could still hear the ghostly music over there. Obviously, there was more than one demonic ghost team that Chu Xiu had encountered before had gathered there. After Chu Xiu and Lu Jiang he took a few quick steps, Lu Jiang he suddenly said, Oh no, the houses in this place are all the same, and they can block the perception. Can you still distinguish between north, south, east, and west? Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, At this time, why do you still care about north, south, east, and west? Do you think we can still get out of this city of the wronged without turning it upside down? That's true. As they spoke, the two of them headed straight for the source of the sound. At this time, in an alley, the battle was more intense than Chu Xiu had imagined. Su Jiang, Chen Jiulong, Xianyuan Wushuang, 2 rogue cultivators, and 4 special ghost generals were fighting fiercely. To be precise, it was not a fierce battle, but a chaotic one. Although the ghost general leading these special demonic ghost teams was strong, it was not a problem for them to kill it together with their strength. But they were still fighting and killing each other. As for the reason, it was very simple. It was because of the token. Although Xianyuan Wushuang did not have any advantage compared to the half-step martial immortals in the central province, he had the entire High Heaven sect behind him, so he was still qualified to compete for the Daoyuo Divine Palace's ranking. Therefore, after entering this place, he found the 2 rogue cultivators and wanted to attack them. After all, Xianyuan Wushuang was not Chu Xiu. After destroying the Sanskrit sect, Chu Xiu basically did not have to worry about the token, and he would definitely get a place in the end. However, the rogue cultivators who dared to enter the city of the wrong generally did not have any foundation. They were not afraid of anything as long as they were willing to die. They just wanted to fight for luck and opportunities with their lives. Naturally, they were not afraid of Xianyuan Wushuang. The 2 sides fought fiercely, which attracted Su Jiang and Chen Jiulong. Su Jiang and Chen Jiulong knew that they did not have the chance to compete for the Daoyuo Divine Palace's ranking, but they also targeted the 2 rogue cultivators and Xianyuan Wushuang. Tokens and soul crystals were useless to them, but they were useful to Ouyang Sheng. Ouyang Sheng's primordial Yang celestial master's lineage had some friendship with them. Moreover, Ouyang Sheng had helped them deal with Chu Xiu before. These were all favors, and they had to find an opportunity to return them. However, the commotion caused by their fight was too great, and it had attracted groups of demonic ghosts. Now that they were in a melee, it was difficult to get off. Chen Jiulong said coldly, Xianyuan Wushuang, and the other two, the Daoyuo Divine Palace's competition is not endless. As long as you hand over your tokens and soul crystals, we will retreat immediately. If we continue fighting like this, more and more demonic ghosts will be attracted, and none of us will be able to leave. The two rogue cultivators were actually a little tempted when they heard this. They were only here to seek opportunities, and had never thought of entering the Daoyuo Divine Palace as rogue cultivators to cultivate. There might have been such people in Daoyuotian history, but they were always in the minority. However, Xianyuan Wushuang sneered. You also know that more and more demonic ghosts will be attracted, so why aren't you the ones who should hand over the soul crystals? You're just two stray dogs who were forced to cut off their own arms in front of Chu Xiu. How dare you put on airs as the descendants of primordial venerables in front of me? You're not worthy. Xianyuan Wushuang's words provoked Chen Jiulong and Su Jiang into a frenzy. Being forced to admit defeat and cut off their own arms in front of Chu Xiu was the most unbearable pain for them. In front of the real top sex, the so-called descendants of primordial venerables were just slightly stronger rogue cultivators with backers. But ever since they stepped into the Jianghu, they had been treated with courtesy by the big sects and fawning and respect by the small sects and rogue cultivators. When had they ever been so humiliated? Chen Jiulong said angrily. So what if it's Chu Xiu? He has made countless enemies in the central state this time, including the Sanskrit sect, the World Sword sect, and swordsman Ling Tian's lineage. Which one of them doesn't want to kill him? He'll die the moment he leaves the Daoyuo Divine Palace. At this moment, a cold voice rang out. Oh, is that so? Then before I die, I'll kill you guys first. How about that? Chapter 1276. When Chen Jiulong saw Chu Xiu appear in front of him, he really wanted to slap himself. Why was his mouth not so effective when it came to other things? Although Chen Jiulong was stubborn, there was no fighting spirit in his and Su Jiang's eyes when they saw Chu Xiu again. There was only fear. In the central province, the two of them had fought against Chu Xiu several times, but they were beaten every time. Especially the last time, when Chu Xiu killed Xian Jialua with 2 moves. His powerful image and power were almost branded in their hearts, causing them to feel fear from the bottom of their hearts. They no longer had the will to fight with Chu Xiu. Xianyuan Wushuang felt even more upset when he saw the fear on their faces. Jealousy burned in his heart. These two fellows had dared to think of snatching his token and soul crystal the moment they saw him. But the moment Chu Xiu appeared, these two fellows were completely terrified and didn't even dare to say a word. He couldn't accept this disparity. Chu Xiu looked at Su Jiang and Chen Jiulong with a cold look in his eyes. Why aren't you talking? Didn't you just say that I would die without a burial place? Su Jiang's body suddenly erupted with a fierce moonlight when he saw the cold look in Chu Xiu's eyes. In an instant, it was as if a bright moon had risen in the pitch-black city of tragic deaths. There was even a wisp of golden spirit light in the center of the moonlight. Su Jiang had burned his spirit in an instant. As the moonlight poured into Chen Jiulong's body, he immediately let out a deafening dragon roar. His blood qi erupted and his body turned into a blood dragon. He directly carried Su Jiang and fled at the fastest speed possible. Go. You can't do it more than 3 times. You can leave once and twice, but now you want to do it a 3rd time? Su Jiang saw the killing intent in Chu Xiu's eyes. It was an undisguised killing intent. In fact, that was the case. Although Chu Xiu's current identity was that of a prime sovereign's successor, he didn't actually have a good impression of them. The primeval sovereign heirs he had come into contact with so far all had a special characteristic. Chu Xiu called this characteristic being a prostitute and having a chastity. Apart from those primeval sovereigns who had truly reached the 8th or 9th heavenly layer of martial immortal, why didn't the other primeval sovereigns establish their forces in the Daoyuotian continent, instead of choosing to cultivate in seclusion in the mountains and forests. Although these prime sovereigns were nominally cultivating in seclusion to put an end to the disturbances of worldly interests, a large part of the reason was that they didn't have the ability. It wasn't that they didn't want to do it, but they couldn't do it. The large Daluotian sects that could survive for thousands of years were almost all forces that had been passed down from the mortal world to the present. They had both strength and resources. Even for a force like Cold River City that rose later, it was only because of the joint efforts of Yi Weikong and Meng Xinghe that they were able to establish their foundation. It was possible for a third or fourth heavenly layer primeval martial immortal to establish a top sect, but did they have the resources to do so? Did they have the energy and ability to do so? Therefore, such primeval sovereigns would most likely begin to weaken after 1 or 2 generations. In the end, their lineage would be completely cut off. They might as well stay in the mountains and forests and give all their resources and energy to a single person to pass down their legacy. Most of these people clearly didn't have the strength to establish a top sect that could be passed down for generations, but they still insisted on having a chastity, thinking that their status was incomparably noble. It was very awkward. Wasn't it like being a prostitute and having a chastity? In fact, at the beginning, Chu Xiu didn't have such great killing intent towards them. Chu Xiu didn't even care about the primeval sovereign's successors. Therefore, it was fine if they escaped and Yuan Fu died. But who knew that they would actually seek death by targeting Lu Fengxian and the others? They deserved to die. Given the strength of Lu Fengxian and the others, even if Chu Xiu didn't make a move, they should still be able to escape. However, they would definitely be seriously injured. Since they were unable to defeat him, they decided to attack his subordinates. That was something that Chu Xiu absolutely could not tolerate. Even Patriarch Blood River, a half-step martial immortal, had died. Yet these 2 people wanted to escape death? The 2 of them burst out with such great speed that only a ray of moonlight was left in the blink of an eye. However, the moonlight suddenly paused in mid-air for a moment. Lu Jianghe's wild laughter rang out. I can't deal with these ghosts, but do you think I can't deal with you too? With Lu Jianghe's interference, the 2 of them only paused for a moment, but it was enough. Chu Xiu's array-breaking technique slashed down. It didn't seem to carry any strength, but all its power exploded in an instant. It was as if the entire world had been shattered by the slash. Everywhere the blade passed, it was like a black hole devouring everything and destroying everything. In an instant, the power of laws was torn apart. The yin and yang of the world flowed in reverse. The slash was like the end of the world. It even affected the power of laws. Its might was comparable to a divine ability. 7 limits, Heaven Devourer. In truth, ever since Chu Xiu obtained Heaven Devourer, he didn't have the time to properly cultivate the saber technique. After all, time in the central province was too tight. Chu Xiu simply didn't have the time to cultivate in seclusion. However, the saber technique was already imprinted in his mind. Furthermore, Chu Xiu had learned sea-shattering and earth-shattering, so he had some foundation. When he had nothing to do, he would polish the saber technique a bit. Thus, it wasn't a problem for him to use it. Heaven Devourer was the strongest of the 7 limits. Its might was worthy of its name. It was a slash that unleashed its power to the extreme. Everything around them was collapsing. The power of laws was being destroyed. Chen Jiolong and Su Jiang were shocked to find that they could no longer take a step forward. The huge black hole behind them was devouring the laws of space. Instead, the closer they were to Chu Xiu, the closer they were to him. Let's do it. Su Jiang poured the last bit of his power into Chen Jiolong's body. In an instant, moonlight enveloped the dragon's shadow. It let out an angry dragon roar that shook the heavens. The 2 of them worked together again. They used the moon dance dragon soar. The lifelike dragon crashed into the black hole, causing it to be destroyed. However, at the same time, the dragon's body was completely destroyed. The huge impact caused a huge crater to appear in the city of the wronged. Although there was a strange power in the city of the wronged that triggered the laws and could continuously repair the buildings, the power of the 2 attacks was too great. The speed of repair could not keep up with the speed of destruction. After a while, Chen Jiolong was covered in blood. He looked in front of him and murmured, "I blocked it." After saying this, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. When he looked back, he saw that Su Jiang's body had already collapsed and was no longer breathing. The collision between the Moon Dance, Dragon Soar, and Dragon Soar was too powerful. The power was almost no different from a clash of supernatural powers. Chen Jiulong's body was strong enough to withstand it, but Su Jiang could not withstand such a powerful force. Chen Jiulong's eyes turned red in an instant. Thinking of the little things he and Su Jiang had done since they were young, he suddenly turned his head towards Chu Xiu, his heart full of hatred turning into only one sentence. "I'll fight you to the death." In the next moment, Chu Xiu took a step forward and punched. Like a mountain-shaking demon, the powerful fist energy distorted the void. With a loud bang, Chen Jiulong, who was already an arrow at the end of its flight, was killed by Chu Xiu's punch. Fight. If you can succeed by fighting, why are there so many losers in this world? How naive. The hearts of the two independent cultivators were filled with shock when they saw Chu Xiu behead two prime sovereign successors with a single strike of his blade and a single punch. Before Chu Xiu could look at them, they took the initiative to say, "Official Chu, we are willing to hand over the token and soul crystal. We only ask that Official Chu spare our lives." Chu Xiu had a strange look on his face. "Who wants your token and soul crystal? I killed them because I have a personal grudge. What does it matter if I give it to you? That's a different matter. I'm only here to settle my grudge, not to steal the token. You may leave." Hearing Chu Xiu ask them to leave, the two of them still had looks of disbelief on their faces. Seeing that Chu Xiu was serious, they came to their senses and hurriedly left. At the same time, they felt a little touched. Chu Xiu might be a little cruel when he killed, but he was very particular when it came to doing things. He was very principled. However, they did not know that they had to thank the Sanskrit sect. If Chu Xiu had not obtained most of the tokens and soul crystals from the Sanskrit sect, they would not have been able to keep their tokens. Xianyuan Wushuang looked at all this awkwardly. Although he did not want to admit it, Chu Xiu's current strength was indeed beyond his wildest dreams. Moreover, if Chu Xiu had not helped him today, he would not have been able to defeat Su Jiang and Chen Jiulong, who could use divine abilities together. With a cold snort, Xianyuan Wushuang put away halberd and was about to leave. But at this moment, Chu Xiu's cold voice sounded. "Xianyuan Wushuang, are you going to leave just like that?" Xianyuan Wushuang suddenly turned his head and said, "What else do you want? Don't tell me you want me to thank you for saving me?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "You don't have to thank me. Show me something practical." As he said this, Chu Xiu looked at Xianyuan Wushuang with killing intent in his eyes and said, "For example, your life." Xianyuan Wushuang's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Holding halberd in his hand, he shouted, "Chu Xiu, how dare you? I haven't provoked you since last time. Don't forget that you promised Elder Wu that you wouldn't kill me." With an enigmatic smile on his face, Chu Xiu said, "Yes, I did promise him that I wouldn't kill you, but you attract a lot of hatred. Now that I see you, I suddenly want to kill you, so I regret it. You have been defeated by me since we were in the East region. I know you hate me and want me to die. Although I'm a very broad-minded person, I can't tolerate someone trying to kill me over and over again. So, I'll have to ask you to die first." As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, the saber light appeared in front of Xianyuan Wushuang in an instant. Chapter 1277. Since he was defeated by Chu Xiu in the arena, Xianyuan Wushuang hadn't fought with Chu Xiu for a long time. Although he didn't want to admit it, the reality had told him that he was no longer a match for Chu Xiu. Under halberd, there was a series of explosions. The powerful force even made Xianyuan Wushuang unable to hold halberd in his hand. Under the attack of Chu Xiu's long saber, he was directly blown away. Xianyuan Wushuang pinched a seal with both hands. The golden radiance turned into talismans and smashed down like a huge seal with the power to split mountains. But the next moment, the heaven cries blood rain suddenly fell from the sky. The huge demon god phantom directly crushed the seal. Chu Xiu's fist smashed down, and a powerful force suddenly erupted. Xianyuan Wushuang was directly hit by Chu Xiu's fist and flew away while vomiting blood. The cruel reality told Xianyuan Wushuang that Chu Xiu was even more powerful than he had imagined. If he didn't face Chu Xiu as an enemy, he would never know how terrifying Chu Xiu was. There was no fighting spirit in Xianyuan Wushuang's eyes, only fear. When facing an evenly matched enemy, even if the enemy was a little stronger than him, he would still have fighting spirit and was not afraid to fight. But now, facing an existence like Chu Xiu, fighting spirit was useless except for courting death. Chu Xiu, I'm still the heir of High Heaven Sect. If you kill me, High Heaven Sect will definitely fight you to the death. Xianyuan Wushuang shouted fiercely, but his tone was somewhat fierce. After all, he had seen the scene where Chu Xiu killed Xian Jialua. Xian Jialua was the temple master of one of the 3 main palaces of Sanskrit sect, an expert in the martial immortal realm. However, Chu Xiu still dared to kill him. It was conceivable what kind of attitude Chu Xiu would have when facing Xianyuan Wushuang. Chu Xiu raised his brow and said, "You're right, your High Heaven Sect still owes me a favor. If I kill you, High Heaven Sect will definitely not acknowledge the debt. It would be a huge loss." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Xianyuan Wushuang could not help heaving a sigh of relief. No matter what the other party's concerns were, as long as they didn't kill him, everything would be fine. However, at this moment, Xianyuan Wushuang was horrified to find that a ferocious and terrifying demonic shadow had appeared under his feet and entangled him. Xianyuan Wushuang wanted to break free, but the demon shadow followed him like a shadow, directly breaking out a powerful demon qi, shattering his meridians and wrapping him in it. Xianyuan Wushuang spat out blood and roared, "Chu Xiu, you said you won't kill me." Chu Xiu spread out his hands and said, "If I kill you it will be troublesome, but if you are killed by the demonic ghosts, it will have nothing to do with me. There are so many dangers in the central province, and this city of wrongful deaths is extremely strange. You are so weak, but you insisted on entering it. It's normal for you to die, isn't it?" Hearing this, Xianyuan Wushuang's expression suddenly changed, and he struggled more fiercely. However, Chu Xiu shouted to Lu Jianghe, "Lead those demonic ghosts here." When Chu Xiu was fighting, Lu Jianghe had been dealing with the demonic ghosts except for stopping Chen Jiulong and Su Jiang. Now that he heard Chu Xiu's voice, he continued to lead the demonic ghost over while complaining, "Can't you move faster? It's very tiring for me to carry these things alone." Chu Xiu ignored Xianyuan Wushuang's complaints. He directly manipulated the Fate Devil Force and threw Xianyuan Wushuang into the crowd of demons and ghosts. Seeing himself being swallowed by those demonic ghosts, Xianyuan Wushuang roared, "Chu Xiu, you will die a horrible death." However, as soon as he shouted, he was completely swallowed by those demonic ghosts and torn into a blood mist. Lu Jianghe couldn't help shaking his head and said, "Why don't you break that guy's mouth? It's not worth it to be scolded before he dies." "In fact, sometimes being scolded is a good thing," Chu Xiu said with a serious face. "A good thing? What kind of logic is that?" Chu Xiu stood with his hands clasped behind his back and said lightly, "Only when someone scolds and hates you will you have the motivation to live a better life. If one day no one even scolds and hates you, it will be a kind of loneliness." Lu Jianghe sneered, "Pretentious. What did you say?" Lu Jianghe immediately corrected himself. "I say, why are you putting in so much effort? Why don't you just kill that brat? No one saw it. Why do you have to frame the demonic ghost? What a waste of energy." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "It's not a waste of effort. Although Xianyuan Wushuang has disappointed High Heaven Sect, he is still the successor of High Heaven Sect. For a top sect like High Heaven Sect, it's impossible for them not to work hard on their successor. Knowing that the opening of Daoyuo Divine Palace is extremely dangerous, they must be prepared. It's better to be prepared. The favor that High Heaven Sect owes me is very useful to me. I don't want to lose it like this." In fact, if Xianyuan Wushuang hadn't courted death this time, Chu Xiu really wouldn't have wanted to kill him. In the Daoyuotian continent, Chu Xiu couldn't just offend people. He also wanted to make use of some forces that he could use. The Eastern Territory was the first place he appeared in, and he was the most famous in the Eastern Territory. Among the 3 major sects in the Eastern Territory, except for Cold River City, who had a grudge against him, High Heaven Sect and Imperial Sky Pavilion could be used by him. Therefore, Chu Xiu actually didn't want to fight to the death with High Heaven Sect. Xianyuan Wushuang always made trouble for him. Although Xianyuan Wushuang's strength wasn't very good, he was the successor of High Heaven Sect. It had to be said that he could really cause a lot of trouble for Chu Xiu. When those demonic ghosts completely tore Xianyuan Wushuang into pieces and turned their attention to them, Chu Xiu left with Lu Jianghe. It wasn't that he was afraid of these demonic ghosts, but that these demonic ghosts, as the murderer, couldn't die in his hands. At this time, in the High Heaven Sect, Fang Yinglong, Qin Baiyuan, and the 3 martial immortals of High Heaven Sect, Linghu Immortal Mountain, were all there. Although the Daoyuo Divine Palace would only be open for a month, they couldn't rest easy. After all, their High Heaven Sect had thrown in more than a dozen people at once, and the weakest one was in the true fire spirit refinement realm. Losing one was enough to make them feel distressed. Of course, from a rational point of view, as long as the Daoyuo Divine Palace was open, it was impossible that no one would die. The only difference was that their gains might be more than their losses. At this time, Fang Yinglong suddenly said, "Why do I always feel a little uneasy?" Fang Yinglong was at the 8th heaven of Martial Immortal, but he was undoubtedly closer to the sky than the other two, so his perception was also more sensitive. Qin Baiyuan frowned and said, "Could it be that something happened to Wushuang?" Although Xianyuan Wushuang's performance had disappointed them recently, Xianyuan Wushuang was, after all, a talent that they had cultivated. They had watched Xianyuan Wushuang grow up, and had always cultivated him as their successor. This kind of relationship could be said to have exceeded that of ordinary disciples. Therefore, even if Xianyuan Wushuang had disappointed them and been punished severely, it was only because he didn't strive hard. If they really wanted to give up on Xianyuan Wushuang, they only needed to give an order to strip him of his status as the successor of High Heaven Sect. Fang Yinglong frowned and said, "The Daoyuo Divine Palace is opening ahead of schedule this time, and it's a little strange. I'm afraid that those demonic ghosts are restless again. The degree of danger is presumably greater than the previous times." As Fang Yinglong spoke, his expression suddenly changed, and he took out a jade pendant from his bosom. The jade pendant was very strange, with a black surface and a crystal in the center that looked like a blood-red eye. At this moment, the crystal was still emitting a faint red glow. Fang Yinglong directly crushed it, and with a flash of light, a scene appeared in front of the 3 of them. It was the scene of countless ferocious demonic ghosts tearing Xianyuan Wushuang apart. The 3 people present were all silent. After a long while, Qin Baiyuan said in a hoarse voice, "Sect Master, gather the disciples and prepare for a new successor." Xianyuan Wushuang, the successor they had cultivated for decades, was dead. Were they sad? Of course they were sad. But they could only grieve. From the moment they entered the central province, they had been prepared for this. A sect wouldn't collapse even if it lost someone. This was true even for Fang Yinglong, the sect master, not to mention Xianyuan Wushuang, who was just a successor. If he died, the High Heaven Sect would continue to pass on. At this time, in the city of wrongful deaths, Chu Xiu was also continuing to hunt demonic ghosts. Previously, Chu Xiu had hunted demonic ghosts for the soul crystals. But now, he mainly hunted demonic ghosts for the ghost generals that had their own consciousness and could condense different elemental powers. The soul crystals of such special ghost generals could provide extremely pure power. Even if Chu Xiu didn't need them himself, he could give them to Lu Fengxian and the others, which could help them quickly condense power and reach the bottleneck. Even Mei Qinglian, who had just stepped into the early stage of the metaphysic realm of heaven and earth, could reach the peak as long as she chose the right attribute and refined several soul crystals. However, what made Chu Xiu feel strange was that there seemed to be something wrong with the city of wrongful deaths. This place seemed to be the base camp of demonic ghosts. In the houses were soul crystals and unformed demonic ghosts. Moreover, those ghost generals and other demonic ghosts should be responsible for patrolling the city, so there should be higher-level demonic ghosts above them. But Chu Xiu didn't see any. And now, although Chu Xiu was in a state of disorientation, he had been walking in the same direction. According to the distance, He should have arrived in front of the Daluo Divine Palace by now. But in fact, he was still wandering aimlessly in the city of wrongful deaths. This huge city full of demonic ghosts seemed to have no end. Perhaps it was because of Chu Xiu's murmur, but as soon as he finished this thought, a sharp howl suddenly came from the city of wrongful deaths. A huge white figure floated in the air like a dark cloud, but upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a monster formed by countless souls. Chapter 1278. After being in the city of the Vein for so long, most of the things that Chu Xiu had seen were ordinary demonic ghosts and ghost generals. This thing was definitely not normal. Even the demonic ghosts in the outside world had never seen such a ferocious and terrifying thing. These human-shaped souls formed together. Chu Xiu and Lu Jianghe only glanced at it and felt a sharp pain in their spirit. It was precisely because they glanced at it that the thing seemed to be stimulated and rushed straight towards them. What is this thing? Lu Jianghe could not help but exclaim. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, I don't know what it is, but I know that if we don't run away quickly, we might die if this thing catches up to us. I have the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet, and the power of my spirit is strong enough, so I might be fine. But you might not be able to. Lu Jianghe shrank his neck, and immediately turned around to escape. He even used the blood escape. Although Chu Xiu was also running, he was not that afraid. Although this thing looked evil, it was not enough to make him feel threatened. Therefore, he even had the time to look at some of the details of this thing. The other party seemed to be a monster formed by countless souls, but in fact it was a whole body. However, a large piece of the monster's body seemed to have been torn off by someone. Who had such strength? Was it Fa Jing or Su Guishan of the Three Pure Temple? While Chu Xiu was still puzzled, Lu Jianghe suddenly shouted, F***CK. What is that thing in front of us? Although Lu Jianghe usually behaved like a coward, he was someone who had participated in the righteous and demonic wars 500 years ago after all. He had also experienced countless battles. Although he was cowardly, there were few things that could make him lose his composure. However, Lu Jianghe was really afraid now. Even his voice seemed to be trembling. Chu Xiu followed Lu Jianghe's gaze and saw that the entire area in front of the city of the Vein was wrapped in a powerful storm. Within the storm, there were countless demonic ghosts wrapped within. Previously, Chu Xiu was still wondering why there were only ordinary demonic ghosts patrolling the streets in such a large city of Vein deaths, and the strongest ones were only ghost generals. Now he finally understood that the truly powerful demonic ghosts were all here. These demonic ghosts were no longer in a fixed state. There were all kinds of them. Some looked like demonic gods and were hundreds of meters tall. There were also some with human heads and beast bodies, looking incomparably savage. There were even some grotesquely shaped ones with 3 faces and 4 arms, like gods and Buddhas. There were also some that were like the thing that was chasing after Chu Xiu. It was impossible to describe their shapes. The storm was like a whirlpool, shrouding everything within it and constantly killing them. Occasionally, 1 or 2 demonic ghosts would be torn in half, but they would escape and disappear in the blink of an eye. When the demonic ghost that was chasing after Chu Xiu saw the storm, its power fluctuation was filled with terror. It immediately turned around and tried to escape. However, at that moment, the storm became even stronger. It actually pulled Chu Xiu and Lu Jianghe into it, causing them to be involuntarily twisted along with the storm. F***CK. What the hell is this? Lu Jianghe was surrounded by blood-red aura. His power had risen to the extreme. Chu Xiu was in a slightly better state. After sensing the surrounding power, Chu Xiu let out a long breath and said, It's the power of rules. It's the power of rules that is calming this distorted land. What? Lu Jianghe did not understand. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, You have not reached the martial immortal realm, so you cannot sense the power of rules. The rules of the central province are actually distorted, which is why demonic ghosts are born. However, the power within the storm was restoring order, and the distorted power was once again calming down. Look at those demonic ghosts. They have probably surpassed the limits of high-grade demonic ghosts, and are strong enough to fight martial immortals. However, in this environment, their bodies are gradually disintegrating, and turning into normal demonic ghosts. If my guess is correct, in the end, they will most likely turn into soul crystals and their souls will scatter. Forget about those demonic ghosts for now. Let's think about ourselves first. Lu Jiang, he had a wretched expression. The power of this storm is so strong. If we are trapped here, we will be torn apart sooner or later. Chu Xiu frowned and thought for a moment, then said, "Let's go to the center and take a look." "Are you crazy? If there is such a powerful force in the periphery, won't we be torn apart if we go to the center of the storm? The center of the storm is the calmest. Besides, staying here is just waiting for death. Why don't we go to the center and see what caused this storm?" Although the power of the storm was strong, the power that calmed the rules was mainly targeted at demonic ghosts and not humans. Therefore, according to Chu Xiu's speculation, the center of the storm should be the safest. The power there should be closer to the outside world, and not the distorted central province. Lu Jiang, he was not confident, but he still followed Chu Xiu straight into the center of the storm. The deeper they went, the stronger the pulling force of the storm became. They could only use all their strength to maintain their balance, allowing the storm to pull them in. The scenery along the way left Chu Xiu and Lu Jiang he dumbfounded. In the center of the storm, all the powers were being divided. Wind, thunder, water, fire, mountains and lakes. The power of the rules had already materialized in front of Chu Xiu and Lu Jiang he's eyes. They were like colorful threads that interweaved in the void and formed the framework of an entire world. Chu Xiu and Lu Jiang he were mesmerized by the sight, especially Chu Xiu. Lu Jiang he's cultivation hadn't reached that level yet, so he was still a little confused by these things and couldn't understand much. However, Chu Xiu had come into contact with the power of the rules for more than a day or two. Combat arts were a kind of materialization of the power of the rules, and these threads were the rules themselves. This kind of power was directly presented to Chu Xiu, and Chu Xiu couldn't help but feel intoxicated by it. Even if Chu Xiu hadn't been able to enter the exalted divine palace to cultivate this time, he was still confident that he could step into the martial immortal realm with just the blessings he'd received. Off to the side, Lu Jiang he murmured, "We've struck it rich. We've struck it rich." Previously, he'd been complaining that he'd followed Chu Xiu into the city of the wronged, but now he didn't feel that way. Although his comprehension wasn't as much as Chu Xiu's, even a trace of it was enough for him to touch the edge of the power of the rules and step into the realm of half-step martial immortal. When they passed through this strange region of laws, Chu Xiu suddenly froze. He stared ahead and exclaimed in disbelief, "Elder Wei!" What appeared before Chu Xiu was a region that seemed to have been cut apart. Half of the rules had been restored, and the power of the rules was the same as the outside world, a pile of yellow sand. The other half was filled with broken rules, just like what they'd seen before. Right now, an old man in a black robe was sitting cross-legged in the middle of those two places. It was none other than Wei Shiya, whom Chu Xiu had been searching for all this time, but to no avail. At this moment, Wei Shiya was sitting cross-legged, but there were countless soul crystals floating around him. Each of these soul crystals had the figure of a demonic ghost, constantly revolving around Wei Shiya, trying to seep into his heart. Wei Shiya's brows were tightly knitted, and his expression kept changing. Clearly, he was being attacked by the demonic ghosts in the illusion. Lu Jiang he was also staring at Wei Shiya's silhouette, and his jaw dropped. Is this real or fake? It wasn't that Lu Jiang he was being paranoid, but Wei Shiya's appearance here was simply too strange. Given Wei Shiya's strength, it wouldn't have been a problem for him to barge into the central region of the Central Plains. However, they couldn't find Wei Shiya in the periphery, and there was no sign of him in the central region of the Central Plains. Who would have thought that Wei Shiya would appear here? This was simply incomprehensible. Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "It's true. I've used the power of my spirit to sense it, and the fluctuations it emitted are definitely Elder Wei's fluctuations." As he spoke, Chu Xiu was about to make a move to shatter those soul crystals and rescue Wei Shiya. If it had been someone else, Chu Xiu might not have been so impulsive. He would have definitely verified the other party's identity first, and he would only make a move after he was 100% confident. However, the other party was Wei Shiya, and not anyone else. Wei Shiya wasn't Chu Xiu's master, But to Chu Xiu, Elder Wei was the only person who had been good to him without any selfish motives. Elder Wei wasn't his master, but he was like a master and a father to him. Back in the lower realm, no matter how much trouble Chu Xiu caused or how many enemies he provoked, Elder Wei had always been the first to stand behind him and help him. Hence, when he saw Wei Shiya being surrounded by so many demonic ghosts, even Chu Xiu couldn't be 100% sure that the other party was really Elder Wei. He had to make a move. However, at this moment, an old voice suddenly sounded. "Hey kid, I'd advise you not to make a move. He's currently trapped in the primordial illusion of dozens of demonic ghosts, and his spirit has already fused with the illusion of the demonic ghosts. If you act rashly and destroy these soul crystals and kill the demonic ghosts, the illusion will shatter, and his spirit will dissipate. On the other hand, if he survives, it'll be equivalent to obtaining the pure power of these dozens of demonic ghosts, and his state of mind will reach a higher level. It'll be considered a form of good fortune." When he heard this voice, Lu Jianghe trembled violently, as if he had thought of something. He murmured, "It's him? That's impossible. How can it be him?" Chu Xiu looked up subconsciously. In front of him there was an old Taoist priest. He was dressed in a luxurious Taoist robe embroidered with cloud patterns, but he was a little slovenly, and his Taoist crown was tied askew. He had a sage-like appearance, but the expression and aura on his face were very strange. Chu Xiu couldn't describe it. If he had to describe it, he would say that it was like he was on the streets of a marketplace, and it was very worldly. It was very down to earth, but when placed next to his sage-like appearance, it was extremely awkward. Chu Xiu felt that the other party was very familiar. So familiar that the other party's figure seemed to be imprinted in the bottom of his heart, but he couldn't recall it for a moment. At this moment, Lu Jianghe said in a trembling voice, "Ning Xuanji." Chapter 1279. In the pugilistic world, those who stood at the peak of strength would be respected as powerhouses. However, there was another kind of person who, even if he was no longer at the peak for 10 or even 100 or 1,000 years, would still have his story spread in the pugilistic world. That kind of person was called a legend of the pugilistic world. Dugu Weiwei was a legend of the pugilistic world, and so was Ning Xuanji. The person standing in front of Chu Xiu was a living legend of the pugilistic world. The Dao sect's sovereign was respected as an immortal. During the period when Dugu Weiwei dominated the pugilistic world, Ning Xuanji was the only one who had the strength to compete with Dugu Weiwei. Even Chu Xiu couldn't understand it. With the environment of the lower realm back then, it was already strange enough that a Dugu Weiwei was created. How could another Ning Xuanji be created? Chu Xiu didn't suspect that the old Taoist in front of him was fake, because Lu Jianghe wouldn't mistake him for someone else. He had been captured alive by Ning Xuanji before. Of course, in his words, he was defeated by Ning Xuanji after a fierce battle. Of course, this wasn't important. Lu Jianghe had such a deep impression of Ning Xuanji that it was impossible for him to mistake him for someone else. However, it happened so suddenly that Chu Xiu's mind went blank at this moment. He stared at Ning Xuanji in a daze. At this time, Ning Xuanji was also sizing up Chu Xiu and Lu Jianghe. He seemed to have thought of something interesting. He looked at Lu Jianghe and said with a chuckle, "I remember now. Aren't you the little pirate under Dugu Weiwei? I heard that you were imprisoned by Dugu Weiwei because of your cheap mouth. Have you been released now? It's a pity that Dugu Weiwei doesn't know how to use people. You're good at stealing dogs. Every one of them is very fat." Lu Jianghe's face instantly turned red, but in the end he could only say in a slightly wronged manner, "I stopped being a pirate a long time ago. I'm the 5th devil lord of the Kunlun devil cult." Ning Xuanji waved his hand disdainfully. "Devil sovereign my ass. Dugu Weiwei made something like playing house with a child, but you guys still treat it like a treasure. You must be crazy." As he spoke, Ning Xuanji suddenly turned to look at Chu Xiu. A trace of doubt flashed across his eyes. "Why do I find you so familiar?" At this moment, Chu Xiu almost broke out in a cold sweat. He could no longer care about Ning Xuanji's repeated Dao Grandpa and Bullsh*T, which had ruined his title as an immortal. Lu Jiang he said that his current appearance is exactly the same as Dugu Wei's Earth Soul doppelganger. Previously, Chu Xiu had asked Tianhun about the soul-splitting technique. After Dugu Weiwei had researched it, he had rarely used it except in front of the people of the Kunlun devil cult. It was not because it was not useful, but because there was no need to use it. At that time, the Kunlun demon sect had already dominated the entire pugilistic world. Even if Dugu Weiwa didn't make a move, the 4 demon lords under him would be able to settle everything. There was no need for them to use the soul-splitting technique. Therefore, there were only a few people in the pugilistic world who could see the appearance of Dugu Weiwei's doppelganger. However, Ning Xuanji was Dugu Weiwei's old enemy. They had fought from the lower realm to the Daoyu Ocean. He might have seen the soul-splitting technique. Before Chu Xiu could finish worrying, Ning Xuanji suddenly slapped his head and said, "Oh right, I remember now. You're Dugu Weiwei." Before Chu Xiu could say anything, Ning Xuanji suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed Chu Xiu's figure. It was an irresistible force, because in that instant, Chu Xiu felt that the nomological powers around him had changed. It was as if the world around Chu Xiu had begun to shrink at that moment. It shrank to a foot away from him, and was easily grabbed by Ning Xuanji. Chu Xiu had never seen this kind of power before. In his hands, the powerful rule's power seemed to be his own earth qi. He could knead it at will. It could even be said that Ning Xuanji's effortless grab was a divine ability. In the face of such a legendary existence, Chu Xiu had already given up resisting. The so-called resistance was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. He was overestimating himself. However, Ning Xuanji took a closer look at Chu Xiu and suddenly said, "You're not Dugu Weiwei. You're definitely not Dugu Weiwei. But you look exactly like one of Dugu Weiwei's doppelgangers. Who are you?" Chu Xiu breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Actually, I'm Dugu Weiwei's successor. I became like this because I cultivated his cultivation technique." Ning Xuanji suddenly sneered. "Do you think I've become senile after staying here for hundreds of years? You're lying. Do you know that under the soul-searching technique, all of your memories will be presented in front of me like a scroll? Even if you peeped at Widow Li next door when you were 5 years old, you can't hide it from me." However, the next moment, Ning Xuanji's expression suddenly changed. He chuckled and said, "Of course, the soul-searching technique is an evil secret technique that goes against the heavens. I'm the sect master of the true martial arts sect, the leader of the Dao sects, and the old immortal who was conferred the title of national preceptor by 3 countries at the same time. How can I know something like the soul-searching technique?" However, before Chu Xiu could breathe a sigh of relief, Ning Xuanji touched the messy beard on his chin and said, "However, although I don't know it, the principle of this thing seems very simple. It's nothing more than invading the other party's mind with a powerful spirit power, sealing the other party's spirit, and then finding the real spirit. Like pulling silk from a cocoon, you'll take out the memories in the real spirit. Just think about it. What kind of secret technique is this?" Chu Xiu felt like cursing at this moment. What immortal Ning Xuanji, he's simply a lunatic. When did I peek at Widow Li taking a bath? In both my previous and current lives, there was no widow next door at all. If he wanted to kill, he would kill. If he wanted to cut, he would cut. The impact on Chu Xiu's state of mind was even stronger than that of the demonic ghost's illusion. In the end, Ning Xuanji did not use the soul-searching technique to check Chu Xiu's spirit. He just threw him back casually and said indifferently, "Forget it, it's a waste of my brain. I won't study it anymore. Although you look the same, you're not Dugu Weiwei. Whether Dugu Weiwei is dead or alive is none of my business now. I haven't solved my own problems yet." Chu Xiu was no longer restrained by the power of rules. He gave Lu Jianghe a questioning look. Is this really Ning Xuanji? He had long known that the real Ning Xuanji might be a little different from the legendary immortal in Jianghu. However, the Ning Xuanji in front of him seemed to be mentally ill and abnormal. In front of Ning Xuanji, Lu Jianghe did not even dare to send a voice transmission. He could only give him a helpless look. This man was like this 500 years ago. Now it seemed that he had not changed. However, at this moment, a slap came through the air, directly slapping Lu Jianghe. Ning Xuanji sneered and said, "Little thief, mind your words. If you dare to speak ill of me again, I'll castrate you. Do you believe me? Lu Jianghe looked aggrieved. I didn't say a word. I didn't even send a voice transmission. Ning Xuanji snorted coldly. There's something wrong with your eyes. Don't play tricks with me. No matter what, I've lived for hundreds of years. I can tell from your eyes that you're up to no good. Chu Xiu could not help but cough. If the people of the true martial sect in the lower realm found out about this, some disciples might even pull out their swords and commit suicide on the spot. Those disciples might not be able to stand it. Ning Xuanji, the immortal, who had been praised for 500 years and made into a legend of the pugilistic world, was actually like this. At this time, Ning Xuanji turned his gaze to Chu Xiu and sneered. Kid, you must be slandering me in your heart now, right? Don't think that I don't dare to slap you. I couldn't slap that arrogant guy Dugu Weiwei 500 years ago. You look like him. I can slap you to my heart's content. Chu Xiu choked for a moment, but in order to avoid being slapped, he had no choice but to obediently withdraw his gaze and stop thinking about those messy things. At this time, Ning Xuanji suddenly asked, You and that little thief came to the Dalyu Ocean from the lower realm? Since you guys have appeared, does that mean that the Kunlun devil cult has risen again in the lower realm? At this time, Chu Xiu did not know how to answer. If he told the truth, would Ning Xuanji slap him to death? Ning Xuanji sneered and said, Don't think so much. If I wanted to kill you, I would have killed you just now. Would I have kept you alive until now? It's not that I and that old guy Dugu Weiwei are irreconcilable. The so-called distinction between righteous and evil is nothing more than a label that someone put on us, because Dugu Weiwei was too overbearing. At that time, I was in the true martial sect. The little bastards of the Kunlun devil cult were not blind. Naturally, they would not provoke me. Therefore, the hatred between me and the Kunlun devil cult is not as big as you think. In that case, Senior, why did you fight an intense battle with Dugu Weiwei from the lower realms all the way to the Great Law Heaven? This question was very puzzling to those who knew Ning Xuanji's character. Everyone in the pugilistic world thought that Ning Xuanji took action for the righteous pugilistic world, and for the common people. However, in reality, the Kunlun devil cult only wanted to dominate the pugilistic world. They did not want to exterminate the pugilistic world and slaughter the world. With Ning Xuanji's character, he would not shout such righteous slogans to crusade against Dugu Weiwei. Even Lu Jianghe, who was like a mouse that had seen a cat, pricked up his ears, wanting to hear why. Ning Xuanji said calmly, Why? If you were in the same realm as me and Dugu Weiwei, you wouldn't have asked this question. When Dugu Weiwei and I were in the lower realm, we were already standing at the peak of the 9 heavens of martial immortal, and trampled on the 9 heavens. At that time, only he and I had reached this realm. There might be one more, but that doesn't count. It's lonely at the top. Do you think that the peak is the real peak? We all wanted to see if there were other sceneries above the peak. Therefore, that battle was imperative. One person is lonely at the top, but 2 people can break this world. Dugu Weiwei doesn't care about your so-called righteous and evil, the so-called general trend of the pugilistic world. I don't care about it either. What we want to see is the scenery above the peak. Chapter 1280. Ning Xuanji's words were unexpected, but it was also within his expectations. Chu Xiu had always believed in one principle. If one was not in the same realm, one should not speculate about the true thoughts of those in a higher position. Who knew what Ning Xuanji and Dugu Weiwei were thinking 500 years ago? It was just like the so-called immortal title given to Ning Xuanji by those people in the pugilistic world. It was just wishful thinking. Have you ever seen an immortal who likes to eat dog meat all day long? Ning Xuanji waved his hand casually and said, Let's not talk about those old things. I haven't been back for 500 years. Since you've returned to the lower realm, tell me, what happened to the Kunlun devil cult and the true martial sect? Have they been destroyed? After knowing Ning Xuanji's thoughts, Chu Xiu did not hide anything. He told the truth. The Kunlun devil cult was destroyed after Dugu Weiwei disappeared. It has only been rebuilt in recent years. I'm the current sect master of the Kunlun devil cult. Ning Xuanji glanced at Chu Xiu and said, Weak too weak. although you look like a doppelganger of Dugu Weiwei. Your current strength can't be compared to Dugu Weiwei at all. Chu Xiu coughed and did not refute. He continued, as for the true martial sect, it has always been passed down. However, its strength is not considered strong. The current leader of the Dao sects is the Taoist master mansion of Mount Longhu. Ning Xuanji nodded and said expressionlessly, "Oh, I see. It was not destroyed. This is beyond my expectations." Chu Xiu realized that he really could not see through Ning Xuanji. Would normal people want their sect to be destroyed? The true martial sect was not destroyed. Looking at Ning Xuanji's expression, he seemed to be very surprised. Chu Xiu asked in confusion, "Why did the true martial sect have to be destroyed? With your reputation back then, no one dared to destroy the true martial sect." Ning Xuanji sneered and said, "Reputation? It was probably a bad reputation. In the past, I pointed at the abbot of the Great Light Temple and scolded him as a bald donkey. The sect leader of the Chunyang Dao sect wanted to discuss Dao with me and was slapped by me. With that kind of standard, are they worthy of discussing Dao with me? I even roasted dog meat in the Sabodhi monastery and borrowed the famous sword of the Hidden Sword Villa. Although they were a little unwilling, they forced me to borrow it. I've offended so many people, and none of my disappointing juniors can bear the burden. Is it strange that they were killed?" Chu Xiu was a little stunned at this time. If it weren't for the fact that the Kunlun devil cult was too overbearing and played the game of those who submitted to them would prosper, and those who opposed them would perish, Ning Xuanji would have been the one besieged by the people of the pugilistic world. At the very least, Chu Xiu knew that even Dugu Weiwei didn't go overboard like this. Killing was just a matter of nodding one's head to the ground. At most, Dugu Weiwei would hold a knife and ask if one was convinced. If one was not convinced, he would use the knife. Unlike Ning Xuanji, he was simply slapping people in the face. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Maybe it's because after your battle with Dugu Weiwei, your reputation was too great, and your legacy was left to the true martial sect. Therefore, no one dared to touch the true martial sect at this time." Ning Xuanji nodded and said, "Oh, that's good." Chu Xiu looked at Ning Xuanji in surprise. He didn't seem to care much about his own sect. Because Dugu Weiwei's physical body was destroyed, he could only use the soul-splitting technique. One was in the netherworld heaven, one was suppressed, and there was a muddle-headed Chu Xiu. There was no way for him to return to the lower realm to save the Kunlun devil cult. However, Ning Xuanji was alive and well. Why didn't he return to the lower realm? Even if he had a plan in the Daoyu Ocean, he should have time to return to the lower realm. As if he could see what Chu Xiu was thinking, Ning Xuanji said lightly, "The Buddhist monks talk about karma, while the Taoists talk about karma. My Taoists pay attention to karma. It's karma to be born in the true martial sect, but it's only for one lifetime. Therefore, I've almost paid back what I should. It's been 500 years. My disciples and grand-disciples in the past are all dead. I don't even know those guys now. Other than calling me patriarch. What do they have to do with me? One life of karma, one life. What does the next life have to do with me?" Ning Xuanji was indeed the supreme figure of the Dao sect. Although what he said was a little vulgar, it was still very reasonable. At this time, Chu Xiu suddenly asked, "Senior Ning, I have some doubts. I wonder if you can answer them." Ning Xuanji took a deep look at Chu Xiu and said, "You're really not Dugu Weiwei. Your character is completely different from him." Just as Chu Xiu wanted to ask what was different, Ning Xuanji asked, "Do you have wine? Do you have meat?" Chu Xiu was stunned. Why would he bring that kind of thing into the central province? When one reached the martial immortal realm, they wouldn't starve to death just by absorbing the spiritual energy of the world. They could completely abstain from eating. Although Chu Xiu wasn't an official martial immortal yet, he could achieve that with his strength. At this moment, Lu Jianghe came over and took out a few jars of wine, roasted chicken, and roasted duck. Chu Xiu looked at Lu Jianghe with a strange expression. Why did he bring these things with him? Did he come to a place like the central province for a picnic? Ning Xuanji rolled up his sleeves, picked up the jar of wine and took a big gulp. As he chewed on the drumstick, he sighed and said, "I haven't drunk or eaten meat for more than 100 years. I've almost forgotten what it tastes like." The Daoyuotian people are too boring. Their minds are filled with cultivation. Chu Xiu thought to himself. That's normal. Their minds are filled with food. That's abnormal. Alright, if you have anything to ask, just ask. Just treat it as the wine money. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice. Back then, you came to the Daoyuotian with Dugu Weiwei. Why are you here now? Ning Xuanji said calmly. It's simple. For the sake of breaking through, and to repay a karma. Back then, I broke through the world barrier with Dugu Weiwei and came to the Daoyuotian. Since ancient times, only Dugu Weiwei and I have broken through the world barrier in this way. Back then, although the battle between Dugu Weiwei and I was intense, we didn't surpass our peak state. However, when we broke through the world barrier, we had a different epiphany. Ning Xuanji pointed at the threads formed by the power of law around him. The world is formed by the power of law. The countless laws may seem chaotic, but they are orderly and regular. If I can comprehend all these laws and arrange them in order, will I be able to create a world as well? The cycle of life and death, creation and destruction. Everything in the world is a cycle of reincarnation. Will the pinnacle be the creation of the world? If someone else said this, they would definitely be regarded as a madman. But it was Ning Xuanji who said this. Who would think that Ning Xuanji was a madman? Although Chu Xiu was also shocked by what he heard, he wasn't at Ning Xuanji's level. Naturally, he couldn't understand Ning Xuanji's feelings. The Daoyuotian Divine Palace connects the two worlds. It's the most direct manifestation of the power of law. So, I've been guarding this place all these years, observing the power of law. At the same time, I've made an agreement with the experts of the top Daoyuotian sections. I'll help them guard these demonic ghosts, but at the same time, no one is allowed to disturb me here. I'll take this place for myself. Of course, this is only one of the reasons. The other reason is that the outbreak of demonic ghosts in the central province has something to do with me and Dugu Weiwei. If Dugu Weiwei and I hadn't shattered the space and connected the two worlds, making the laws between the two worlds a little more chaotic, the outbreak of demonic ghosts in the central province wouldn't have been so violent. So now that Dugu Weiwei has been suppressed, I'm the only one who can repay this karma. At this point, Ning Xuanji suddenly snorted and said, Dugu Weiwei is too straightforward. His brain is almost filled with astral energy. No, he doesn't use his brain at all. When I broke the world barrier, what I comprehended was to control the laws and create a world to transcend. But what Dugu Weiwei comprehended was to use absolute power to cut through the shackles of the world's laws and reach the realm of transcendence. So when that guy came to the Daoyuotian, he looked indignant. After we fought in the end, he went against the Daoyuotian sects and killed them even faster than in the lower realms. But in the end he was slapped in the face and suppressed. That guy really thinks the Daoyuotian are made of mud. They came to the Daoyuotian from the lower realms, with tens of thousands of years of heritage. Ning Xuanji glanced at Chu Xiu. That's why I said you're not Dugu Weiwei. You don't look like Dugu Weiwei at all. Dugu Weiwei doesn't use any tricks or schemes. It's not that he can't use them, but that he doesn't want to use them. But you kid have a lot of thoughts. Of course this isn't a bad thing. If Dugu Weiwei had as many thoughts as you 500 years ago, he wouldn't have been suppressed. Of course, in other words, if Dugu Weiwei had as many thoughts as you do, he wouldn't be Dugu Weiwei. After hearing Ning Xuanji's words, a thoughtful look appeared in Chu Xiu's eyes. Dugu Weiwei's original idea was to break free from the shackles of the world's laws with absolute power and reach the realm of transcendence. But when did he change his goal to find the longevity heaven? After being stunned for a moment, Chu Xiu put away the messy thoughts in his mind. He pointed at Wei Shuya and asked, Senior, why is old Wei here? Ning Xuanji said a little awkwardly, Ahem, you're talking about this kid. I made a mistake when I was calming the distorted laws here. Don't worry with me guarding here. Even if he doesn't get any opportunities, he won't die. You've seen what these demons and ghosts look like. They're evolving more and more. If I don't take care of them, I'm afraid they'll become real creatures. So I had to do something big. I directly returned their lair to its original state and created a normal space in the central province. Maybe I was a little too powerful, so I pulled this kid in from the outside world. Given Ning Xuanji's age, It wasn't wrong for him to call Wei Shuya kid. After all, Wei Shuya had lived for 500 to 600 years. Hearing that Wei Shuya was safe, Chu Xiu didn't have to worry anymore. Chapter 1281. Although it was an accident that Wei Shuya was trapped here, it was also a stroke of fortune. Ning Xuanji's words could not be wrong. There was no need for him to deceive Chu Xiu and the others. Looking at Chu Xiu and Lu Jianghe, Ning Xuanji asked, "Since the two of you are here, does that mean that the exalted divine palace has opened again?" Chu Xiu nodded. Ning Xuanji sneered disdainfully. "Those guys are too calculative. It seems like they still don't believe me. Do they think that I can't suppress these things? They actually sent people here to die." Chu Xiu looked at the demonic ghosts that were being returned to their original form by the storm of laws and asked in confusion. "The exalted divine palace has so many experts, and even Senior Ning is here. Are they still unable to completely exterminate these demonic ghosts?" Ning Xuanji shook his head and said, "They can be exterminated, but there is no need to do so. In this world with distorted laws, the demonic ghosts are immortal. It might seem like you killed them and obtained the soul crystals, but in reality, the soul crystals are only the energy they have gathered. Their true spirits will never be destroyed in this distorted world. Killing them is useless. Unless the exalted divine palace is destroyed and the two worlds return to normal, the demonic ghosts will never be exterminated. As for the Daluotian, they will not face the demonic ghosts unless they have no other choice." "Why?" "Because they owe the demonic ghosts karma." Ning Xuanji looked up at the demonic ghosts and sneered. "The first generation of demonic ghosts is also the strongest generation. How did they come into being? They were the victims who had fallen in the spatial storms between the two realms when they transmigrated. It was the ancestors of those people who had abandoned them. Some of them were even the ancestors of their sections. When these demonic ghosts were facing me, it was naturally impossible for them to attack my mental state. But what if it was someone else? Even those ninth heaven's martial immortals dare to say that they don't have any loopholes in their hearts? Furthermore, the existence of the Middle Province was also beneficial to them. The great heavenly divine palace only opened once every several decades. Although a lot of people would die, it would also be able to steadily produce several martial immortals. If it were any other place, who could be certain that they would be able to take that step?" Chu Xiu nodded. That was true. Even sects like the Sanskrit school or the Heavenly Net Treasure Temple, which had dozens of profound understanding of heaven and earth cultivators. How many half-step martial immortals did they have? Moreover, half a step was only half a step. Whether he could take the final step in this lifetime was also unknown. However, these demonic ghosts are quite interesting. In the past few years, I've also captured a few demonic ghosts to study them. They are neither human nor ghost. In the beginning, they could only rely on the power of the rules within the central planes to survive. They only exist on instinct and have no physical bodies. But later on, they used the power of the natural order to construct the city of the wronged. They gradually gained physical bodies, spiritual intelligence, and could think. They were no different from normal living beings. It's just that they can't remember their memories from when they were alive. But their physical bodies are the true spirits of those cultivators who didn't dissipate. So, are they resurrected or truly new existences? Interesting. Hearing Ning Xuanji's words, Chu Xiu felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He suddenly thought of something. He was formed from the earth soul of Dugu Weiwei, and was once a part of Dugu Weiwei. But now he had his own spiritual intelligence and became Chu Xiu. Why did this situation resemble the demonic ghosts so much? They used to be incomplete existences, but after an unknown amount of time, they gained their own spiritual intelligence. So was the evidence of a person's true existence the source of their existence, or their memories? There was no correct answer to this question. But it was obvious that Chu Xiu believed that he was Chu Xiu. This answer was the most correct one. Lu Jianghe gently poked Chu Xiu from behind, indicating that he should stop talking nonsense and leave quickly. They felt a little awkward staying with the old Taoist, Ning Xuanji. Of course, he wouldn't admit that he was scared to death of the old Taoist. Seeing Lu Jianghe's little action, Ning Xuanji said indifferently. Don't worry, I don't eat people. No matter what, we're old friends. I'll send you off. Now that Dugu Weiwei has been suppressed. Even if I detain you, no one will come to ransom you. With that, Ning Xuanji stretched out his hand and waved. A pitch-black door appeared in front of him. Go out and you'll see the Daoyuo Divine Palace. Chu Xiu bowed to Ning Xuanji and said, Thank you, senior. Lu Jiang he also hurriedly cupped his fists and followed Chu Xiu into the door. However, after Chu Xiu and Lu Jiang he left, Ning Xuanji frowned. Dugu Weiwei. What the hell are you doing? He was certain that Chu Xiu was not Dugu Weiwei. His aura and soul were different. He was certain of this. In terms of understanding of Dugu Weiwei, in the lower realm and the Daoyu Ocean, apart from Dugu Weiwei himself, only his opponent, Ning Xuanji, knew him the best. If Dugu Weiwei suddenly broke free from High Heaven sect one day, and then caused trouble in the Daoyu Ocean world, Ning Xuanji wouldn't be surprised. What Ning Xuanji found strange was that Dugu Weiwei actually got a guy from the lower realm who looked exactly like his clone, but he didn't have Dugu Weiwei's aura. Why was that? Forget it, I've already taken a different path anyway. What does this Dao Master have to do with me? Let's deal with these things first. Ning Xuanji raised his head and took a big gulp of wine. With a wave of his hand, the storm in the entire city of the wronged suddenly intensified and began to stir wildly. After Chu Xiu and Lu Jiang he stepped out of the door. They appeared in a wasteland filled with yellow sand. But this area was different from the distorted laws in the central continent. The laws here were exactly the same as the outside world. In the middle of this wasteland, a huge glazed palace sat in the center. The entire palace was thousands of meters in size and was extremely majestic, but there were no doors or windows. It was as if the outside world was a single entity, covered in a dazzling golden glazed luster. But upon closer inspection, the so-called glazed luster turned out to be array Dao runes shining brightly. This was the Daoyu Ocean Divine Palace, which was built by gathering the strongest forces in the lower realm. Lu Jiang he didn't observe the Daoyu Ocean Divine Palace at this time. He just breathed a sigh of relief and said, Finally, we're far away from that old Taoist priest. Who would have thought that after 500 years, that old Taoist priest is still alive? Chu Xiu was surprised and asked, Ning Xuanji didn't do anything to you back then, so why are you so afraid of him? Lu Jiang he coldly snorted and said, Didn't he do anything to me? He almost played me to death. That old Taoist priest is simply a psychopath. You can never guess what he wants to do. The most important thing is that his strength is too strong. He can simply do whatever he wants without the slightest scruple. I even dare to say that if Sect Master swapped places with this old Taoist priest, he would attract even more hatred than Sect Master. Chu Xiu pointed behind him and said, Be careful with your words. That person is in existence above the 9th firmament of martial immortal. You haven't even touched the shadow of a martial immortal, and he's already preparing to create his own world. What you say now, Senior Ning Xuanji might even be able to hear it. Hearing Chu Xiu say so, Lu Jiang he immediately shrunk his neck, not daring to say any more nonsense. At present, only Chu Xiu and Lu Jiang he had Ning Xuanji open a back door for them, so they came to the Daoyu Ocean Divine Palace ahead of time. The others should still be wandering around in the city of the wronged. But it was useless even if they came ahead of time. The Daoyu Ocean Divine Palace was controlled by formations, and wouldn't open until the time was right. Therefore, Chu Xiu closed his eyes and rested in front of the Daoyu Ocean Divine Palace with Lu Jianghe. At the same time, he was also digesting all the information he had obtained from Ning Xuanji. Chu Xiu already knew the whole story of the battle 500 years ago. It was complicated in the minds of later generations, but in fact the cause and effect were extremely simple. It was nothing more than two guys who stood at the peak preparing to fight to see if they could reach the peak. However, ever since they arrived in exalted heaven, the two of them had been separated, and the period of time between them had been a little confusing. Tianhun told himself that Dugu Weiwei was going to hide in the Yellow Springs heaven, and seize the 3 demonic Tao origins to open the longevity heaven and reach transcendence. And now, Ning Xuanji said that Dugu Weiwei was clearly going to prove his Tao with strength, break through the shackles of this world, and reach transcendence. In such a short period of time, how did Dugu Weiwa suddenly change his way of thinking? Moreover, the Daoyuotian's foundation seemed to be stronger than Chu Xiu had imagined, because Ning Xuanji said that he was now working with the Daoyuotian continent. With Ning Xuanji's character and strength, if he could completely crush all the Daoyuotian sects, would there still be a need for cooperation? They would all scram to the side. He would monopolize the central province and slowly study it. But now Ning Xuanji chose to cooperate with the Daoyuotian sections. Obviously, a single sect might not be able to defeat Ning Xuanji, a supreme expert who already stood above the ninth heaven, but if they joined forces, they could make Ning Xuanji treat them with caution. After all, 500 years ago, Dugu Weiwa had single-handedly fought against an entire world. Even though he had caused rivers of blood to flow and turned the entire great overarching celestial capital upside down, he had still failed. All kinds of information kept echoing in Chu Xiu's mind. It was simply a mess. It was like this every time. Every time he thought he knew the truth of that year, a clue suddenly appeared, messing up his thoughts and making the truth even more confusing. Just after Chu Xiu and the others waited here for a few days, someone finally came out of the city of the vein. They were Su Guishan and Fang Yizhen from the Three Pure Temple. When the two saw Chu Xiu and Lu Jianghe waiting there, a look of surprise appeared in their eyes. The strength of these two was actually so terrifying. They cut through all the obstacles and killed the demons and ghosts along the way. They even came earlier than them. Chapter 1282. Although Su Guishan and Fang Yizhen were surprised that Chu Xiu had arrived so early, Fang Yizhen still took the initiative to greet Chu Xiu. I didn't expect Brother Chu to be the first to come out of that damned place. You two aren't slow either. We found a shortcut to get out. Chu Xiu looked at Fang Yizhen and said, Brother Fang, it seems you already have a card up your sleeve. The Three Pure Temple is probably one of the few sects in recent years to have two disciples enter the exalted divine palace. Fang Yizhen chuckled. It's all thanks to you, Brother Chu. Oh, why is that? Because your robbery there gave me inspiration. After entering the Central Plains, I also chose a place to rob, and I also accumulated quite a few tokens. Chu Xiu looked at Fang Yizhen with some surprise. This was an outstanding disciple of the Three Pure Temple, but he was copying him and robbing others. This was a bit too damaging to his image. Most importantly, Chu Xiu's robbery had spread to the entire Middle State. Those martial artists hated him to the core, and took advantage of the fact that the Brahmin sect had made a move against him. However, no one said anything about Fang Yizhen. It could only be said that the Three Pure Temple was too strong, so strong that even if those cultivators were robbed, they could only suffer in silence. After exchanging a few words of greeting, Fang Yizhen sat down next to Su Guishan. However, Su Guishan sat cross-legged on the ground with his eyes closed, while Fang Yizhen took out a pig trotter the size of his face and gnawed on it. It was very inconsistent with his demeanor as a Taoist master. Although the two outstanding disciples of the younger generation of the Three Pristine's palace were both extraordinary, their temperaments were worlds apart. Su Guishan was a man of few words and had a calm personality. Fang Yizhen, on the other hand, had a lively personality and a strong sense of worldly affairs. Of course, no matter which one it was, neither of them were ordinary people. The group waited for 4 or 5 days before another dozen or so people came out of the city of the tragic death. Some people appeared very calm, such as Iguatia, Ouyangsheng, and the others. However, there were also a few heaven and earth mystic insight realm martial artists who appeared to be in a sorry state. It was obvious that they were chased out by a group of demonic ghosts. Before the great heavenly divine palace, the profound understanding realm cultivators had already been eliminated. Those that were qualified to fight for the final ranking would, at the very least, be half-step martial immortals. Everyone looked around. In fact, they had more or less figured out who the final winner would be. The Three Pure Palace occupied 2 spots, so Su Guishan and Fang Yizhen would definitely advance. Next was the Heavenly Luo Treasure Temple's Fa Jing. All the tokens and soul crystals collected by all the cultivators in the Heavenly Treasure Temple were in Fa Jing's hands. In addition, Half of the tokens and soul crystals collected by the Brahma sect were also in his hands. Therefore, Fa Jing's wealth was probably more than Su Guishan and Fang Yizhen's, and he might even be ranked first. Apart from the three of them, Iguatia from the World Sword sect would definitely be able to advance. This time, there were quite a number of people from the Sword sect under the heavens. Among them, Yanji involuntarily gave up the fight for the ranking and gave his token and soul crystal to Iguatia, so Iguatia would definitely have a place. Then there was Chu Xiao. Although Chu Xiao had few subordinates, they were not weak. Moreover, everyone knew that he had robbed a group of cultivators, and then joined forces with the Heavenly Treasure Temple to kick the Brahma sect out of the competition, obtaining half of the Brahma sect's soul crystals and tokens. In this way, Chu Xiao might have accumulated more than Iguatia, and would definitely be able to advance. Therefore, there was basically no suspense in the competition for the Great Heavenly Divine Palace this time. The top 5 had already been decided, and only the last spot was still up for debate. There were also many who were qualified to compete for the last spot. Among them, Zhuo Bufan from the Martial God sect was qualified. He was a half-step martial immortal, and had fought quite a few people from the Martial God sect. There was also Ouyang Sheng from Heavenly Sovereign Yuan Yang's lineage. He was only a step away from the martial immortal realm, and was even stronger than Zhuo Bufan. Moreover, although he was alone, Su Jiang, Chen Julong, and the other primeval sovereign successors who had entered this place before had all given their soul crystals to Ouyang Sheng, knowing that they weren't qualified to make it to the end. There were also several cultivators in black. They were from the mysterious heaven realm of the northern region, and were also from a large Dao sect, but they took a different route from the orthodox Dao sections. However, under the powerful influence of the Three Pure Temple, the mysterious heaven realm was still able to make a name for itself in the northern region. Although they had kept a low profile after entering the Central Plains, they were still qualified to compete for the ranking. In the crowd, Zhuo Bufan frowned and looked around. Among the people present, he was the most nervous. Everyone else had victory in their grasp, but he couldn't afford to lose. The mysterious heaven realm had always kept a low profile, and the level of their disciples was also very average. They hadn't lost a single disciple in coming to the Central Plains this time, so it wasn't a big deal even if they couldn't enter the Great Heavenly Divine Palace competition. Ouyang Sheng was only one step away from becoming a martial immortal, so whether he entered the Great Heavenly Divine Palace or not, he was bound to become a martial immortal. The only difference was that he could save some time after entering the Great Heavenly Divine Palace. Zhuo Bufan was the only exception. He had only just become a half-step martial immortal. Furthermore, he had gathered the entire War Martial God sect to help him collect the title plates. If he were to fail, the War Martial God sect would suffer the greatest loss. Therefore, Zhuo Bufan looked around and suddenly transmitted his voice to Ouyang Sheng. "Brother Ouyang, what do you think about attacking Chu Xiao and snatching his tokens and soul crystals?" Among the people present, the only one Zhuo Bufan could offend was Chu Xiao. He didn't dare to touch the Three Pristine Palace or the Heavenly Treasure Temple, nor did he dare to offend the person behind Ouyang Sheng. There were many people in the mysterious heaven realm, but only Chu Xiao was alone. Although Lu Jiang he was also here, it was clear that in Zhuo Bufan's eyes, Lu Jiang he was not a person. Moreover, there would always be a battle between the eastern region and the southern region. Therefore, he didn't need to consider the consequences of attacking Chu Xiao. Ouyang Sheng said indifferently, "Why should I attack? I have accumulated enough soul crystals and tokens, so why should I attack now? Zhuo Bufan, you want to pull me out just because you don't have enough? Do you think I, Ouyang Sheng, am an idiot? Also, you have seen Chu Xiao's strength. He shattered a martial immortal's body with one strike, and destroyed a martial immortal's primordial spirit with one strike. With such strength, do you still have the courage to cause trouble for him?" Zhuo Bufan shook his head and said, "Of course Brother Ouyang is not an idiot. I do want Chu Xiao's token, but defeating Chu Xiao is not a bad thing for you, Brother Ouyang. Previously, when you struck Chu Xiao while he was down, you had already offended him to the extreme. Perhaps you didn't understand Chu Xiao before coming to the Central Province. He is a schemer, ruthless, and vengeful person. Back then, When the people from the Bliss Demon Palace wanted to kill him, he actually joined forces with the Heavenly Demon Palace to stir up a storm in the southern region and destroy the Bliss Demon Palace in advance. Although your heavenly exalted Prime Yang's lineage is powerful, it is still best to deal with an enemy like him in advance. If Chu Xiu enters the Daluo Divine Palace and becomes a martial immortal, I'm afraid there will be no end of trouble for you, Brother Ouyang. Furthermore, Chu Xiu isn't as powerful as you think, Brother Ouyang. The other party is also a half-step martial immortal, but he was only able to kill Xian Jialua because he relied on a secret joint attack technique executed by the people around him. Now that he only has one guy with him who isn't that strong, how can he still use that technique? Ouyang Sheng frowned slightly but didn't say anything. Zhuo Bufan continued. Moreover, I have another piece of news. Su Jiang and Chen Jiulong died at the hands of Chu Xiu. What? Who did you hear this from? Is that true? Ouyang Sheng's expression changed slightly. Although he wasn't that close with these two, they had known each other for a long time. Moreover, the elders of the sect had also interacted with them. Zhuo Bufan said. 2 cultivators saw it with their own eyes. As far as I know, the descendants of the prime sovereigns all have a single descendant, so they must have all kinds of secret techniques on them. You wouldn't have been killed without even knowing who the killer was, would you? I can't possibly deceive you about this, Brother Ouyang. When we leave the Daluotian continent, you can ask the prime sovereigns behind those two and you'll know. Before Ouyang Sheng could recover from the shock of this news, Chu Xiu suddenly stepped forward and walked toward Zhuo Bufan. Zhuo Bufan, I didn't come looking for trouble with you, but you came looking for trouble with me. It seems that you really don't want to enter the exalted divine palace this time. Chu Xiu sneered and the aura around him burst forth. Zhuo Bufan's expression changed drastically. Chu Xiu, don't you slander me. I'm just discussing the exalted divine palace with Brother Ouyang. What right do you have to say that I'm looking for trouble with you? What proof do you have? Voice transmissions between cultivators of the same level could absolutely not be heard by others. Even a first heaven martial immortal wouldn't be able to detect it. That was why when others saw the exchange between Zhuo Bufan and Ouyang Sheng just now, although they knew that they were transmitting their voices, no one knew what they were talking about. In fact, Chu Xiu didn't know what Zhuo Bufan had said to Ouyang Sheng. But ever since he refined the demonic ghost soul crystal and put on the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet, Chu Xiu's senses had become extremely sharp. From the way Zhuo Bufan looked at him, Chu Xiu sensed malice. Since it was malice, why should he care what the other party said? Slander me? What proof do you have? Chu Xiu sneered. I don't need proof when I do things. Besides, I don't like you right now and want to kick you out. Is this reason enough? As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, he had already swung his saber. The invisible saber momentum instantly enveloped Zhuo Bufan. Ouyang Sheng, who was next to him, moved and turned into a golden ray, instantly dodging to the side. His chances of entering the exalted divine palace were almost 90%, so he didn't want to cause trouble at the moment. And even if Su Jiang and Chen Jiulong really died at the hands of Chu Xiu, it had nothing to do with him. While they were alive, he could still help them by relying on their friendship. But now that they were dead, Ouyang Sheng had no interest in avenging the 2 dead people. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.